And hopefully you can all see the presentation that's there. So first of all, I'd like to really welcome you to the international virtual visit for the UK and Irish branch of the IACRN. And I've got there in brackets and Sweden, because we're really fortunate to have Sabine Linden speaking tomorrow about her experiences of clinical research nursing in the Nordic countries. So we're really delighted to welcome them as well. So we are running from the 19th and the 20th of May, so today and tomorrow, full days. So we're really delighted to be able to do that. And so the UK and Irish branch, it started in 2015, and Jennifer Allison and myself, we were the co-chairs. And when Jen stepped up to be the president of the IACRN, she took a step back from being the co-chair, and we're delighted that Claire Whitehouse became the co-chair for the branch. We meet quarterly and have been having online meetings, and there's around about 20 members in the European region who join us for the calls. So the sessions will stop at each break. So if you are on the session, you will need to log back in, but we thought that'd be a good way to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to attend. They are being recorded, and you'll have to be a request to be unmuted. So this is the programme, the schedule for today. We are making small tweaks as we go along, and it's usually to add things in. So you'll see down at the bottom here that we've added in a session from Jennifer this afternoon at 2:20, and Jen's going to be speaking about the accreditation for clinical research nurses that the IACRN are offering, which is fantastic. And then tomorrow's session, and as I say, these may change a little bit, but we're hoping that these will be added to, if anything else. And one of the things that we're doing is we're doing some analytics, and we're asking people, if you are doing things on Twitter, if you could use the hashtag IACRN21. And so far, I've just done some analytics. This actually just came through from Simpler yesterday. And for those of you who do any analytics with Twitter, Simpler do a healthcare hashtags offering, which is free. And they offer limited analytics, and this is one of the things that you can do. You can see so far we've had about 700,000 impressions and 336 tweets, which is fantastic. So I shall stop sharing that. And without further ado, I'd like to move on to the first session in the programme, which is an interview with Steve Mcswiggen. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
How are you doing? I'm Steve Mcswiggen. I'm the Deputy Director of the Clinical Research Facility here in Edinburgh. So welcome to sunny Edinburgh this morning. And I'm a research nurse to background or trade, and have been involved in research for about just over 22 years. I feel very old now, actually, when I say that.
Yeah, well, I was on a session yesterday when I was saying that I attended the General Clinical Research Centre Nurse Managers meeting in Washington in 1997, and that certainly made me feel old, I tell you. So it's the topic for Steve's interview is the clinical research facilities influence and impact supporting UK research and clinical response to COVID-19. So I'd like to kick off, Steve, if you could maybe give us some background on the clinical, my notes have just fallen down. Give us some background on the clinical research workforce in Edinburgh, please.
That's a good question, that because it's sort of mobile, but I'm going to concentrate, I think, today on the clinical research nurses, given the audience that we have. But we have about 170 clinical research nurses employed in NHS Lothian and the University of Edinburgh. They're split about 140, I think, that are NHS, and about 30 or so that were university. I run 3 facilities. We've got 50 research nurses in the clinical research facilities. Jean manages a large team out with it, and there's a large oncology team of about 25 nurses as well. So quite a diverse and big spread across the city, concentrated really at the 2 main hospitals, but also, you know, the infirmary, which is mental health, etc. So we have a wide a wide pool of staff.
Are there any community clinical research nurses or clinical research staff, Steve?
Yeah, well, we have 3 based within the clinical research facility who are 2.2 full-time equivalents. So we do quite have we can take on some trials in the community, and I think that there's probably a good chance that that team will be expanding, or the scope of their activity will be expanding over the next year or so, because I can see a lot of COVID work in particular being directed towards the community.
Yeah, and I guess it's more, kind of a bit of feedback there. I guess as more care's directed towards primary care setting, then because that's where the patients will be, that's where a lot of the research will be conducted.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I was wondering if could you tell us how Edinburgh's clinical research workforce prepared for the first wave of COVID, please?
I was going to say with panic, but there we go. But we cast our mind back maybe to about February last year. I guess we're all sort of noticing what was happening, particularly not just in China, but in Italy. I went to a meeting on the 5th. I was just looking through my diary this morning to familiarize myself with sort of dates. But I went to a meeting on the 5th of March with a sort of a leadership thing, and I was at a table with a consultant from A&E, an immunologist, and the director of NHS 24 in Scotland just happened to be at the table, and they were talking about COVID as it was hot in the news. And they were saying, we really need to get ourselves prepared. The country's going to go into lockdown. This was on the 5th of March. I couldn't really believe it at the time, but I left that meeting and spoke to Juliet, I think that evening, and perhaps it was on the Friday. By the Monday, we pulled a team together because the first patients were beginning to be admitted with COVID in Scotland around about that week as well. And we thought, well, we need to pull our team together to see how we as a clinical research community respond to this. Our immediate priority was to look at supporting the NHS, supporting clinical care. But there was a meeting with myself, Jean, Bruce, who runs as I've mentioned, a large team of research nurses, Miranda Odom, who runs the emergency research team, Dave Hope from our critical care team, Juliet, of course, and some from the oncology. And we sat and we thought, well, how are we going to support NHS clinical services, but also how do we maintain some research capacity, because we're pretty confident that we're going to be called into the action. That was on the Monday, the 9th. We have a contingency plan within the clinical research facility, actually, which was quite useful because it allows us to triage what we can carry on with if in an emergency situation, really. So it's sort of there for a terrorist attack or for inclement weather, but it was a contingency plan that was quite useful. It made a bit of a benchmark for us. So what we did was we had a look at that and realized that we would have to carry on about 28 of 92 active trials within the CRF, and we sort of pushed the stop button and everything on the Friday the 13th. I remember that day quite well because it was the last day I was out in the pub in the last year, so it wasn't particularly lucky. So yeah, there was an effort then made to do a couple of things: find staff for clinical areas who have previous experience, particularly concentrated on critical care, develop a team that would lead on the COVID research, and also then looking towards using the clinical research facilities as a space for clinical areas that were going to have to be decanted. So that all happened over a 4 or 5 day period. And I think our stories probably mirrored many clinical research facilities and research teams across the UK about that time last year.
Yeah, and I should say that Juliet is Juliet MacArthur, the lead nurse for research, the chief nurse for research in NHS Lothian, and has been a fantastic support for clinical research nursing and midwifery in Lothian for a number of years.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and she's got a really important position there because she's got a seat at the executive table, which is great. We're talking about impact and influence of research nurses in particular. She is our advocate at that level, and she does a fantastic job at it.
Yeah, and I remember being in a meeting with Julia in beginning of March last year, and we were developing our special edition or focused edition on clinical research nursing for the Journal of Research in Nursing. And she said, "Oh, we could use this thing called Teams," and I had never heard of Teams in the beginning of March last year, and oh, how the world has changed since then.
She's always a step ahead of us, Gordon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Steve, I was wondering if you could tell us specifically within the CRF, what was the impact on staffing? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, good question that there, because as I mentioned, we've got 3 clinical research facilities, 2 adult, 2 separate hospitals, and a pediatric one. And casting our mind back to that time, we immediately pulled together a team of research nurses who had previous clinical experience in critical care. So from Jean's team and my own and the critical care teams, so 20 research nurses were deployed from that 170 into critical care almost immediately within a week or 2. 8 of them were from the clinical research facility. With a number of staff also, if you cast our mind back, it just seems so long ago, but it wasn't that long. We had a lot of staff who were shielding as well, a lot of uncertainty around who could be at work and who couldn't. So we lost a few, maybe about 6 or 7 nurses in that shielding category almost immediately. The CRF at the Western General was taken over by the hemo-oncology services. And by I mean taken over, I mean we delivered that service for 14 weeks. So we had a team of nurses here, about 10 research nurses, supported by 5 research nurses from oncology who took on the hemo-oncology ambulatory care. So normally that would require quite a lot of training, but we had 4 days to get ourselves set up in chemo care, etc., and do it. So as you can imagine, a fairly frantic and frenetic pace of work. And also the Royal, which you'll be familiar with, that became an ambulatory care service for hepatology and acute and medicine and renal in particular. But our nurses were supporting those teams deliver that sort of short stay, really no overnight type of daycare treatments, really.
And I'd imagine that the physical setup of the CRS lends itself quite well to that.
Yeah, because the big challenge at that point was really around space, about keeping people socially distanced. If you think of a hemo-oncology suite, patients coming in for treatment were less than a meter apart at that point on chairs, and they needed to decant them, to create some space. So that's why we were pretty much ideal for that. Also, a large number of our staff were put into a COVID research group led by Miranda Odom, who I'm sure you're aware of. And she took responsibility, supported by Jean and myself and others, to coordinate the research that was coming in, the research studies that were coming in from the request to support immediately with COVID research.
I think moving on from the kind of first wave, then obviously it's the first kind of COVID vaccines were coming online, AstraZeneca trials and so forth. How was that managed locally?
Actually pretty well. I think I'm looking at Jen and all really of all that we've done in Southampton and CRS across the UK that have really stepped up to the mark. But we knew about this time last year that we needed to come up with better treatments for COVID. It was a massive issue that we didn't really have a lot of evidence behind some of the treatments, but we also knew the vaccines were going to be rolling out, and I'm sure we're all very familiar with the Oxford AstraZeneca story. But the key element from that was the CRS were in use. That would have been the home to do these trials. We didn't have them, so we ended up commandeering outpatients areas which were closed really to outpatients. Here at the Royal, actually New Sick Children's Hospital, we managed to find an area there, pull together a team of about 200 staff. There were lots of staff around that were not research savvy, but they were able to help on the delivery of that trial. And for those that worked on Oxford, and there were many sites across the UK that were involved with that, we were recruiting really over about a 2-week period. So that team recruited about 450 patients in less than a fortnight into a really quite a fast-moving vaccine trial, and perhaps now is the time to sort of celebrate that really and say that it's amazing that that was May last year, and by December that the evidence was in and that was being deployed nationally. I mean, can we ever think of anything like that in our careers? There's nothing's ever moved with such pace, towards findings. Incredible. So I think we're all very proud to have been involved in that.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of ethical approval and expedited approval from regulatory authorities, the clinical side of things, the involvement from the public, it's just been amazing from start to finish. It really has.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we're at substantial amendment 24 in that trial now. So there were days when we were having to reach, before staff come on, train them on an amendment that had come in overnight, in those early days. So
Wow.
quite a challenging study logistically to pull together, but extremely satisfying. And hats off to Miranda and co that were leading on that locally.
Yeah, and as the kind of first wave began to wane, how that transition of getting back to normal, if you like, with the studies you were involved in, how did that process work?
Well, we still had 28 studies still active within the clinical research facility that were carrying on with sort of essential visits over the summer. We didn't do any recruitment up until about July on those when we opened the recruitment again. And by August, another 30 of our 60 something that had paused were reopened and recruiting. So it was getting our staff back. So by the end of June, early July, we had returned. Our staff were beginning to return from the clinical services and coming back in, and the CRF was able to, come out, take back its space to get back to research activity. But that's been an ongoing issue since August. Just constantly trials restarting and new trials, of course, coming on board.
And how did you then prioritize which ones would either restart or which ones you would be starting?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, because there's many, if we're sure if those of us have been active in this area over the last year, there are many requests for support on trials. So in fact, we're getting dozens per week of, can we support this study? So there's a COVID prioritization group set up within our organization, led by university academics mainly, but NHS staff as well. And interestingly, myself and Miranda Odom were both nurses on that prioritization panel, which again sort of talks about, the header really about influence, because we were really able to describe what's doable at a site level. So so what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're taking on trials that we could recruit to, that weren't competing with other studies that were high priority, and also we were given prioritization to the urgent public health studies that had been categorized as such by the Department of Health and IACRN, etc., over the past year. So they get priority, really.
And are some of those now beginning to look at long COVID as well, are they? Or?
Yes, there's a number of long COVID trials. There's one called FOS COVID, which has been following up all survivors from the hospital, which has been running for quite some time. I think it's running across a lot of centres. We're really only supporting that in terms of within the CRF of support to the team, space. But yeah, there's definitely a push for these types of trials, and more, I think, in the offing.
We mentioned before about the amazing response to the call for research and development of research across the whole of the UK and Scotland. I mean, obviously you're based in Edinburgh, but how's that kind of spread, the kind of response and uptake of research across the whole of Scotland?
Well, here, this is the thing, I think, for us, is that we're very closely aligned across Scotland. We don't really have the same infrastructure that they do in England with the NIHR and CRN, CRFs. A lot of the work up here is sort of based around CRFs, and we link in quite closely. So myself and Leslie and Carol from Tayside in Aberdeen, and Chloe in Glasgow speak fairly regularly. We share best practice. The whole idea of these trials that have been running over the last year, even with the UK CRF network, is to meet up, look at other sites that are up and running, and see what we can learn from them, so that we anesthetize ourselves from some of that pain of getting started on them as well. If somebody else has done it, sharing your documents, etc. So that's happened consistently and persistently over the last year, and I really hope that continues.
Yeah, and I think the kind of attitude and ethos of sharing is always something that's always been there within clinical research nursing. And I think, when I first started working in the CRF in '97, from the huge generosity of the American centres that Ali Stevens and I visited, to the group that was set up for the 5 initial Wellcome Trust CRFs. And it's really gone from there that if somebody's developed something, there is a real feeling of why reinvent the wheel. It might not immediately be applicable in every area, but if there's something there, then everyone's happy to share that, so that people don't have to kind of go through the process of developing things on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. You just want to save people from some of that activity, really, don't you? So, and you don't know when you need stuff either. So you have to, make sure that you really embed a culture of collaboration and try to help each other out, really.
Absolutely. You've mentioned the vaccine studies. How many are active at the moment, and do you anticipate more in the future?
I don't know how many are active nationally across the UK, but I would imagine Jen would know, but I'd say there's been 10 or 12 trials currently active across the UK. In Scotland, there's probably 4 that are really going. So there's the AstraZeneca ones we know, Novavax, Janssen, and we've just been recruiting to Valneva, and there are more coming. There's pregnancy studies, pediatric trials coming, and of course there'll be trials in looking at the variants, maybe not on the same scale as before, but certainly more. Jennifer, you're going to comment?
We have 13 running.
Yeah, well, there you go. She's one more than what I thought there was in the country, so I
Me
don't
too.
So,
it was 11. It was 11 a week ago. It's 13 now.
And Jen started 2 on their own.
Yeah. She's spun out a wee vaccine delivery set there. I mean, there's money to be made in that. We'll pine on that because. But yeah, it's a phenomenal effort. So there will be trials in pediatrics, no doubt. There will be trials running in that area already. There will be booster studies looking at the impact of what happens in different, combinations of vaccines, and also how long the antibody response lasts, and if you give another dose, what happens there? How does that protect us? So and protecting us against these variants that are rising. So there's a good year or two's worth of heavy work ahead of us all in this area.
Yeah. And does that include sort of novel routes of delivery of the vaccine? Obviously, but was stuff in the news about non-injections being used.
Not seen them. Actually, that's news to me at the moment, but I'm sure it's probably just because I haven't checked my emails this morning that, as Jen says, you don't know what's appearing in the last week. If overnight might be on our radar. We do have a meeting on Thursday, so that might pop up then. But yeah, it would be, reasonable to think that there will be other methods other than the IM or subcutaneous injections.
I should say, if anyone's got any questions for Steve, please just put those in the chat, and when we've finished having this discussion, we can put those to Steve. I was wondering what your main thoughts were over the past year for your research and the teams involved. What's this meant for research and for the staff that the workforce in clinical research?
Well, trying to pull it back to the title, really, it's about increasing our visibility and the influence, really, of research. So it's pretty clear that at a very high level now within our health board, that the impact of and the work that has been done by our research nurses and colleagues has been noticed, really. I think not just in Edinburgh but nationally. And the importance of that around some of the treatments that we have and the vaccines, and having that workforce that are able to deliver that type of activity. I think that may have, in some places, has come as a bit of a surprise that we have this going on and that these people are here. So for me, to answer that question, really, it's about, I think our visibility has increased, our influence, the fact that we have research nurses, speaking to this audience, that are involved in national groups around delivery and prioritization of research activity is really important for us, not just as a politically, but also, you know, for our place within our own profession, and it's great to see. It's great to see that really. You know, we've been advocating for that for all of our working careers really, and I think that it's coming to that point now that we have a real opportunity now to make sure there's continuous investment in research, that we look at the areas where we have gaps. You mentioned community. That's something that we need to address, certainly up here, maybe not in other places, and also security of tenure is something that I'm really passionate about. You know, unfortunately, my facility that you know, where I work, that we are all on permanent contracts. That's not the case across the landscape. We need to, you know, turn this into a positive around this, to say if we have these people, they're here, they've got good career structures, they're very knowledgeable. We've demonstrated that they've got transferable skills in spades over the last year. It was felt that our research, I remember a snowy day when we locked down one of our band 7s, been asked, which we deployed onto the wards, could you do a blood pressure? I mean, come on, you know, we've knocked that on the head now. So I think that we want to make some capital around this, around our specialty really within our profession.
Yeah. Just alongside that, I guess the nursing uniforms have been a bit of a hot topic in the UK more widely, but for those of you who don't know, there's a national uniform for nurses in Scotland, for the health service in Scotland. So all the nurses at a similar band will wear the same uniform. So your nurses are wear the NHS uniform. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, all of ours do within the clinical research facility. We have some groups that wear sort of, you know, the emerge team wear a sort of specialised scrubs, you know, in the emergency department, etc. But we did have at one time a sort of like a uniform for research nurses. I see pictures of you on the wall here in front of me.
The black polo tops.
Yeah, your black polo tops and stuff, and your chinos, looking terribly smart and young, you know. But
and with hair on my head.
Absolutely. Yeah. So so it's great that it would be good to see if there was some recognition. I think that some of us not too fussed about it. Some people feel very passionate about it. Some people don't want to be pulled into a discussion around, you know, whether they are clinical or not when they go on to ward areas and stuff, and that's why they're there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
I think so, because I mean, it's I think one thing it does do is it helps to reinforce that clinical research nurses are nurses.
Yes.
You know, sorry.
Yeah, and also for us, you know, I think that COVID has driven some of our research teams into uniforms, because you do not really want to be going into ward areas in your civvies now at all. And, you know, I've seen more staff being compliant with that. It's actually a national policy in Scotland that nurses in a clinical area are in uniform. There's no debate about that.
Yeah, and Jen said about a research uniform, so that they're still seen as being clinical.
Yes.
But it makes that kind of helps with that visibility. I remember speaking to someone who did wear, I think they were a university employed research nurse, and they were wearing their own clothes, and they felt like actually it was a bit elitist because they were the only clinical person in the unit that wasn't wearing a uniform. But I think there's a real debate about the pros and cons of that moving forward. I was wondering if you
I would normally be in a uniform here, but
I know.
Sorry.
Do you not
I would normally be in a uniform because I was not when I'm speaking to such a distinguished audience, Gordon. So I thought I would smart myself up. I'm not a shave. I need to do that with the mask. Anyway, sorry.
No, I was going to say, for a minute I thought you were on the farm, but no, obviously you don't wear the uniform on the farm. You're at work. I was wondering if you could tell us what your main thoughts are on the past year for research, and Oh no, we've done that one, haven't we? So I beg your pardon, sorry. So what's the current focus and what impact have your team and colleagues had, do you think?
Well, our current focus really at the moment is just finishing off the delivery of the first phase of another vaccine study that started a week or two ago. But looking over the next month or two, we are really focused on that recovery roadmap that we're pushed towards about restarting activity, because there's quite a lot of pressure on investigators and funders and sponsors that are not doing COVID activity to return to some sort of normality, and we're trying desperately to do that. So within the CRF, we've got a large number of trials in setup, more than 40 that are due to start up before the end of August. 5 or 6 of them are phase ones, and then the centres that do that will realise what a heavy burden it is. Immediately for me, I've got an MHRA inspection due within the next 6 to 8 weeks. I haven't heard from them yet, so that'll be my focus very soon, getting prepared for that. But I also wanted to sort of touch on something really around our staff and our workforce. We need to really think about how we capture some of their experiences over the last year, and also how we can support them, because I'm sure we're all feeling quite tired after a year's worth of probably relentless activity. Even on holidays, you're not off. You're permanently on call. Have been over the last year. So we've spent quite a lot of time, on mental health first aid, training mental health first aiders, making sure that people can speak, that they can raise their concerns, and that we are sort of mindful of the pressures that people have, just not just at work, but in their family life. So those are things I'm really keen that we spend some time on. We've been doing it anyhow over the last year, but particularly now that we're coming into a period where some activities fading off and new stuff is starting, I really want to make sure that before we do that, we hit the go button on it. We're all okay to crack on.
Yeah, and I think it's when things do begin to kind of slow down to some extent, although I'm sure they're not. That's all relative, isn't it? But that's when sometimes things can really hit people, isn't it? When they're absolutely going hell for leather and really, really busy, they kind of manage. But it's when things begin to kind of slow down a little that's when often it can hit people, isn't it?
For sure, yeah.
Yep. Steve, I was just going to ask you just one other question, if that's okay with you.
Right.
Just something that's very close to my heart in terms of student nurses' involvement in clinical research. The Edinburgh CRF, they take some student nurses for experiences, do they?
Not as much as I would like,
Okay.
but that's happening, and I think it is really crucial. It speaks to a wider issue, really, which is if we're really thinking about how we sustain our workforce over the next 5 or 10 years, and we really need to be doing as much as we can to just see research as part. It's normal. It's nothing special. It's just what happens within the NHS. It's been happening for the past 70 years, and as you touched on it there about people feeling a little bit of elite, because they're not in uniforms. We just need it to be visible, and part of that comes with really showing the clinical research in particular. I'm not talking about research nurse careers or nurse researchers. I'm talking about clinical research being a normal experience for the training of our staff. And the more that we do that, and then some centres are really, really well ahead of certainly where I feel we are here, they must sure find it easier to recruit into these posts. And also there's a touches on something there, which is actually demonstrating to people that there is a career. We're here. Look at us. I'm looking at the top line here. There's 100 years worth of clinical research experience between me, you, Jen, and Jean that I can see in front of me here. That's that's a lot. So we are the evidence that there are careers in this, and they're fantastically interesting jobs to have.
Yeah, and from the university sector where I work myself, to make research alive to students, rather than, you know, it's been viewed as very much a kind of research and evidence-based practice, which is hugely important. But a lot of the students kind of see it as quite a dry subject and something that's difficult to relate to clinical practice in a lot of ways. And you're absolutely right in terms of careers. And I think if we can embolden the students and give them more experience, even if they don't have a chance to have a clinical research experience themselves, if they're aware of that as a career option, then I think that's only good for the clinical research, nursing and midwifery career options and possibilities.
Sure. I just seen a comment popping up there from Dermot, you know, about nursing students and medical students happening with the vaccine trials. We had that same, you know, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get people. We've had staff that were involved in the delivery of that, looking to come back and do placements with it. So these are opportunities, and it just starts sometimes with pulling in those that are most interested and making it a little bit more, you know, personal for them. And I think if you do, it's a good, any feedback we've had from students, and I'm sure this is mirrored across the whole of the networks, it's been resoundingly positive and interesting, and they leave us buzzing for what they've learned, really.
Marvelous, thank you. Has anyone got any comments or any suggestions for Steve? Just while we're waiting for those to come in, the one of the things that's not actually on the schedule, but I'm going to try and fit in, is the BBC clip about Natalie Elliott, one of our students who went to the Glasgow CRF, and the BBC did a little piece about student nurses and students in the first wave, I think it was. So I'll try and get that into the schedule at some point.
Okay, thank you very much. If anyone has any questions or anything for us, you know, just give us back. I think that we're not unique at Edinburgh. This has been mirrored across the whole of our network, and the people that we speak to and people that we're in touch with, and our friends and colleagues across the whole of the UK and beyond. So, you know, it's just a real privilege to be part of this community, really. And thanks for inviting me along. Hope I haven't blown it too long there for you, Darren.
No, not at all. No, that's perfect. And thank you, and thanks to all the team at the CRF and clinical involved in clinical research. It's just it's hugely inspiring to hear the kind of stories and the kind of the process and the journey that you've been through over the last, what's coming up for 1.5 years now, isn't it? So yeah, marvelous, excellent. Well, thanks very much, Steve. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Gordon. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. I was just about to end the whole session there rather than the interview. That wouldn't have gone very well. Jen, do you just want to come in for a second, just while I get the next presentation up?
Sure. Hi. Well, that's really fascinating. And I really want to talk about the uniform thing, I have to say, at some point. And I suggested to Claire it could maybe be a poll that we do, because I think definitely a uniform is needed, and we should maintain that. I think most clinical research nurses now are in some sort of uniform. And I personally really like it when they stand out from clinical colleagues, so that it helps to just raise awareness of research in a very subtle way. Because if we were all in NHS blue and stripes and whatever the locals are wearing, the clinical teams are wearing, it would be, it's lovely because we are nurses and to be part of the nursing team. But I think just something, just like in our institution, the nurse specialists wear a slightly different uniform. And also nurses like infection prevention nurses are in a distinct color. I think it would be a really good thing that we maintain. I would want to locally maintain our identity in the gray, so that every time they appear, research, the thought of research just gets triggered. And it even says Southampton Research. I happen to have mine tunic here. And this is the matron uniform. So it's the same neck that the other matrons in the hospital wear. They would be in purple with a white piping. We're in the research gray with the purple piping, but with this very snazzy mandarin neck that stands up, and you see it says Southampton Research, which is really lovely. So it's just a little subtle visual like the can of Coca-Cola that you see in the movies, where you suddenly want a can, you're suddenly thirsty for a Coke.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing, but it'll be interesting to see. And I think locally, our trust has said that they want to maintain a research uniform into that consultation piece. They've said that they want that to be a separate option.
And I think one of the findings from the research I did from my doctorate was that a uniform would be well received, but it would be better if it was a separate uniform. So you simultaneously convey that clinical research midwives are clinical,
Yeah.
but that it helps with that whole visibility thing.
Mm.
So that when you walk into the ward, because it must start a conversation about, oh, that's different from other uniforms. Why is that? And
Hmm.
then that can lead on to a conversation about research. And those are the sorts of things, certainly in my own case, there was that conversation that led me to begin to think about clinical research nursing as a career option.
Yeah,
So these sorts of things really help with that.
I think so. And you know, and we had been in tunics, not tunics, in what did you call them? Because we don't call them that in America. Polo. We had been
Polo
in
shirts,
like
yeah.
pullover polos when I first started in Southampton in 2002 or three, whenever it was, and they were green, and they had the university dolphin logo, and it looked like we were working in a like a center for animals or something.
Or a
Or
crash.
or more like a you know, where they use like a pet shop or you know, an undersea world center, and it was a very pretty logo, but the university quickly changed it and streamlined their logo, so that was fine. We were able to then get rid of it. But um, the idea of being in a nurse's tunic, a nurse's uniform with the pockets and the structure, and I feel very proud and stand up quite tall when I'm wearing my uniform at work, and I would like that recognition that I'm a nurse, and um, I think it's lovely. Fiona's being offered a brown uniform like a brownie. She says, "Oh dear."
Yeah.
Um, that's tricky. I think when we went to grey, I went off and found the different colors that were going to be available. And having spoken to the director of nursing, got R&D approval and all of that, and we saw what colors there were, and there was a daffodil yellow. There was a sort of a light brown. It wasn't as nice as a brownie, I have to say, Fiona. It was not a very appealing sort of grungy, uh, pale brown, and the gray. So we were all really excited by the gray and thought that looked smart. So anyway, more to talk about that, I think.
I think so. And it's certainly a hot topic. I mean, across the whole of the NHS, but I think
Mm,
in clinical research nursing, and I
yeah,
think from what Steve was saying, I think there's a real opportunity just now where the awareness of clinical research and the awareness of the importance of clinical research nurses and midwives as is at its height. We really need to try and take advantage of
I
that.
think so.
Yeah,
It's a very easy way of advertising us,
yeah.
to be slightly, because it does just even start the conversation, as you said. It's something that our new director and I are going to be discussing. It's on our to-do list because the
Yeah.
consultation's open till the end of this month.
And it's certainly something I know that there's discussions about in locally and Lothian as well about that. But I remember back to when the CRF was set up, and Steve alluded to the black polo tops and chinos, but that was something that Ali Stevens and I just made an executive decision. But it was one of those things that back in the day when you didn't really need to, or you probably did need to ask permission, but we didn't bother. We just did it.
Probably
Uh,
best sometimes, you know,
I think
it's
so.
better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission.
Permission. That's what the dean of the medical school explicitly said to us.
Yes.
So we took him at his word.
Well done.
Marvelous. Great. So we'll move on to our next session. So this is from the Birmingham, the CRF and NHS Birmingham Foundation. So this is from Joe Gray and Gollum McGinnell. So this is a recording. So just let me get the screen up. Oops, I beg your pardon. Let me just stop that a second because I didn't set the sound on. Share sound. for me doing the actual instructions on how to do this, I forgot to do it myself. Excellent. So I'm sharing the wrong screen there, am I? That's great. So are you seeing the video there? Yeah, marvelous. Okay, I'll just play this.
Can you make it full screen, Gordon?
Yeah.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Gilly McGinnell and I'm the Clinical Deputy Manager at the Clinical Research Facility at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. So this is where all our patients and our participants in any trials come to when they first want to take part in research. So they will first come through and meet our lovely reception staff. So I'm going to take you through now and we're going to go and meet everybody. So come through. So as we walk through, this is our reception area where we've got our brilliant reception team. I'm just going to introduce you to one of our staff. So this is Nikki, our receptionist.
Hello, my name's Nicola and I'm one of the Clinical Research Facility receptionists. I welcome the patients when they come in for their study and I screen them and to make sure they're COVID safe. And then I inform the outpatients, to let the nurses know that they're here. I really love working here because of all the different types of studies that we do and different trials, and it's really fascinating, really interesting, and the team are absolutely wonderful.
So the Clinical Research Facility in Birmingham opened up in 2002 and it was opened up by Gary Lineker, who kindly donated his signed shirt, England shirt, to us. So I'm now going to take you through to the outpatient area, which is the main hub of research activity at the research facility here. So this is the outpatient area in the Clinical Research Facility where all our patients first come to when they first come here for research. So before I actually take you through, I'm just going to introduce you to one of our doctors who was one of the vaccine doctors on our trials that we've been doing over the last 18 months. So this is Kush.
So I've been working as a doctor on the clinical trials for the last year and we've run 6 vaccine trials in that time. That have all recruited really quickly and have delivered some really meaningful results. As a doctor, my job is mainly to assess patients when they're signing up for the trials to make sure that they're safe to be able to participate in the trials, as well as making sure that we monitor their health as they go through the study. It's been a really great team to be a part of, actually. All of the staff here have been really friendly, supportive. Made it feel like we're part of the Clinical Research Facility team family.
So as we can see, this is where the main activity happens. So you can hear all the noise in the background to me. This is where all our patients come for a variety of different reasons for research, whether that will be oncology studies where they receive cancer treatment, for gastric studies where they can have a colonoscopy and we will look after you before and afterwards. Or it can be for our vaccine studies. So we've been doing loads of COVID vaccine studies over the last year. So really lovely atmosphere for patients and for staff to be in. And we're going to go and meet some of the nurses now and just find out a bit more about what they do. So come with me. So this is Danny, one of our research nurses.
So I work for the cancer research team. So the unit here enables us to have a specialist space for us to see our patients, enables them for a safe space to share any concerns, a space for us to gain informed consent and give them access to treatments that they may not normally have access to, which is brilliant for us.
So before I take you to our inpatient area, where all our patients can stay up to 24 hours, or even some days they can be here to up to 7 days, I'm just going to show you what happens in here. So this is our clean utility, where we get everything prepared for our drugs, so things like vaccines. So we can see one of our staff in here getting everything prepared. So as we walk out, this can show that actually how our drugs are made in here, and then we can give them straight away to our patients, which is just next door. So this is our inpatient area where patients come nationally and regionally to come for research trials. So that could be patients that are needing advanced therapy.
Sorry, did the screen
Gordon,
change there?
just click on the arrow again to restart it.
Oh, so you're still seeing
We
Golly, are
still
you?
see her, but it's paused because
Okay.
I think somebody entered the meeting. It's odd. It
Okay.
happened last night. Just click play again.
Therapies, so that they can have to stay for up to 24 hours, and sometimes they're going to have to stay for 14 days so that we can monitor them appropriately. The other thing that we do here as well is we have healthy controls come so that they can have blood sampling done. We can do lots of other assessments to check that more about their treatment or more about their disease as well. So I'm just going to take you through just around here so that I can show you our isolation room. So this is our isolation room straight through here. So this can be used for human challenge trials. So where healthy controls, all patients with a specific disease can be given a virus or the vaccine to check how well the vaccine works against the virus. So let's just go through here now and we'll have a look at what that looks like. So this is one of our isolation rooms where you can hear there is a bit of a change in the sound. That's because it's got the pressure to ensure that the viruses that we're giving our patients, all participants, is kept in this room, and that's made sure that then our patients, visitors and our staff who are on the other side are all kept safe. I'm just going to take you through now to show where Claire is working, waiting for one of our patients to arrive. So come with me. So this is Claire. She's one of our senior research sisters at the Clinical Research Facility.
Hello, I'm Claire. Oh, well, I've worked here for over 20 years. It's such an exciting place to work. There's always something new to learn. I've been involved in so many different clinical trials, ranging from different specialities. We're always trying to find new treatments for patients and provide the best care. And most importantly, for the last 12 months, I've been involved in multiple COVID vaccine trials. So we really have been making a difference.
So one of the best things about the CRF in Birmingham is that we've got a lab facility embedded within the structure of the CRF. So these are our lab technicians that we're going to hear from them today, and they're going to explain just some of the work that they do.
In the CRF labs, we perform a range of pre-analytical processing on patient samples. For example, isolating serum and plasma from patient blood samples. The samples we receive vary from day to day, anything from blood to biopsies. What I enjoy most about my role here in the CRF labs is being involved in the future of patient healthcare.
So another great option that the Clinical Research Facility has is this imaging suite, which is fantastic for patients in Birmingham to be able to then have a colonoscopy, endoscopy, bronchoscopy as part of research. This enables better treatment for our patients, but also allows better technology, which we can see around the room at the moment, for this to happen. So thank you so much for this whistle-stop tour of the Clinical Research Facility in Birmingham, which our staff have been able to talk to you and showcase just some of the work that we do. So it's a huge thank you, and bye-bye from me.
And thank you, Golly. That was a really interesting tour of the facility. And I think Birmingham was one of the initial 5 CRFs that was set up, along with Southampton, Cambridge, Edinburgh,
Manchester.
Manchester, yeah, and Helen Pidd's in Manchester as well. So
That's right.
yeah, no, that was fun
That's
meeting up.
lovely.
I know it's lovely to see the development of the CRFs over, because that was really from the beginning of the 2000s that they first opened up, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's right. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year in Southampton. I think that's probably the case for many of the others. I wonder, is there anyone here from Birmingham who wants to say hello? If you put your name in the chat, or put your camera on and wave at us, or put your hand up, we'll try to find you. We've just got 3 pages of people now. So a name in the chat might be the easiest thing.
Yeah, we're up at 54 participants now, aren't we? Which
it
is
is
fantastic.
great, isn't it? And there's some really nice comments about the video, and there's a query as to whether it's available on YouTube. So that would be a question to Birmingham. I have no idea. They may have just done it for this purpose. We're
well,
all going to be doing videos for our refunding this year. So there'll be others, I think, this next couple of days you might see, and then other people who might not have wanted to preempt their bid by filming a video for this.
well, it was on Vimeo, so
Was it?
you should be able to search for it on that, unless they've made it private. But I guess I wouldn't be able to play it if that was the case.
Here we are. There's Diana. Diana, let's see if I can find you in the list and unmute you. Yes, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then you should be able to unmute yourself, Diana, and say hello, because people are saying such nice things. Oh, has she gone? Did I scare her off? Oh, well. Is there someone else?
Well,
Oh, you're there.
Nicola's our next presenter, so I was just taking the opportunity to
okay.
unmute her as well.
Let me just, let me see if I can find Diana again. Do you see her to unmute her, Diana? There she is. Ask to unmute. Now you should be able to click your unmute button. We don't hear you. Are you talking, Diana? Hello? No. That's too bad.
There's a question in there. I have a question for it from Judy. I have a question for established centres. If you're building a new CRF, could you talk about what the essential facilities would be to have in-house? They're planning one in Belfast.
Is that a question for everybody?
Yes, please, Judy said.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Do you want to try to unmute everybody? Have a conversation.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, when we were setting up CRF in Edinburgh, it was about talking to the local investigators, talking to having a think about future research that might be conducted in the area, and trying to reflect the facilities that would be required for that. There's obviously core elements in terms of clinical facilities, but a lot of it will reflect the local expertise and clinical research in the area.
Yeah.
And an important
I think
point
also it's a tricky time when we're up against our funding budgets to our funding bids to give away all our secrets. But yeah, you need to think about what you need locally, really, what your research priorities are, and adapt to that.
Absolutely. And I guess post-COVID, then, designing facilities that actually work in that context in terms of patient flow and so forth, and social distancing. And
Yeah.
Kay, I presume that's Kay Walker, has said make sure you've got enough space for staff to write things up as well as the clinical space, because yeah, you need space for filling in CRFs and so forth,
Yeah,
or
and
completing new
storage.
CRFs, storage, absolutely, yeah.
And Steve's going to give everything away because his funding isn't on the 5-year cycle that ours is. Up north, north of the border, it's a bit different. So that's good.
Marvelous. Well, maybe that's something we could come back to later on, because I'm keen to move on to Nicola. Nicola, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hi, Nicola. Hi, Nicola. Nicola, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yep. My name is Nicola Verstralen. I'm a research matron and a job share CRF manager at the NIHR Lancashire Clinical Research Facility up in sunny Preston, although the sun has just gone in, so I've had to turn the lights on. So I am also an NIHR 70 nurse leader. So I'll explain a little bit about what that is in a minute. So I'm here today to just give you a bit of an oversight of of our CRF and our research department, and also a bit of light-hearted. We've got a few videos that we're going to show, and some of them have been made professionally, some of them have been made by me, so it's not as good. So just a bit of a light-hearted talk about what we're up to in Lancashire. So as I said, I've explained who I am. I have job share with Jackie Bramley, who's the actual CRF manager for our CRF. If anybody doesn't know where we are in Preston, we're the little red space on the map there. We're close to Blackpool. We've got Blackpool Tower. You might have heard of Leyland Trucks. And we're up northwest of England. And the photograph at the bottom there is our core CRF team. So I don't know if to call you Chris Whitty or Gordon. Could you move the slide along, please?
Next slide, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of what our team is about, and what our nurses have been up to over the pandemic, and some of the videos will show you a bit about what they've been up to. So we're a small team, as you can see. That's that core team that was on the photograph in the Lancashire CRF, and we partner with our local community and mental health trust, Lancashire and South Cumbria. So the main acute trust is Lancashire Teaching Hospitals, and our community trust is Lancashire and South Cumbria. We also have academic partner, as in Lancaster University, and we also work really closely with the University of Central Lancs. Our research department are a team of, well, I was going to say large, but it's not as large as Steve's team, and I'm sure Jennifer's there. So we've got about 40 nurses and midwives, and in our CRF, we not only deliver adult trials, but also deliver on paediatrics. So we're a bit of an all-rounder CRF, obviously seeing mental health patients as well as patients with dementia. So we're all set up to be sort of dementia friendly, and the question that came in earlier, that's just one of the things that I think would be worth looking at if you were potentially going to see people with cognition issues, making sure that it's dementia friendly. I'm a research nurse, so I started off my career as a neurosurgery nurse, and worked in intensive care, and I've been in research since about 2006, so quite a while now. And between us, we've got lots of nursing experience. Jackie, the CRF manager, is a paediatric nurse by trade, so that's great because obviously she can understand the paediatric side of things. The other core nurses, we've got an ED nurse, and we've got Karen, who's an adult oncology nurse. And our research department covers most areas of health. So that's sort of the research delivery side, delivering other people's research. We've also got in the research department a clinical academic faculty, is what we call it, that is driven by nurses, power to the nurses, to build homegrown studies and educate clinical staff about how they can develop their own ideas for research. And I would just say that as a nurse and as a CRF manager, just thinking about what do we do, and literally we perform every single job there is to do in research. So it's assessing risk, we're writing SOPs, to delivering nursing care to patients. I mean, think about last week, we had a patient down in the CRF, and as looking at risk, it was the lowest risk sort of study. We had an emergency situation, so we're all trained in intermediate life support as well. And I've really been thinking about what Gordon has done in his PhD previously, and thinking about what are our titles, and when you actually sit down and think about what we do so much. As I say, Jackie, our manager, sees also adult patients, so she's had to do a bit of training on the adult side of things, and our other research nurses who are adult trained have to see children, so there's lots and lots of different things involved in that. Do you want to move on to the next slide? So what do I do as a 70 at 70 nurse? So I'm leading on basically a culture change within our organisation, and hopefully a little bit in our local patch of the hospitals within the large acute trust. And it's such a passion of mine as a research nurse to try and embed research as part of all care. And so it's such a privilege to be able to get to this leadership role. It's a program where I'm doing it for 2 days a week for 3 years. And there's a number of projects that I'm doing along those lines. And I'm always interested to hear how others are embedding research across the NHS or wherever they work. So if anybody's got any ideas they want to throw my way, that'd be great. We're really fortunate that we are doing the Magnet research study, which is a trust-wide service improvement project to improve health and well-being across the trust. And our chief nurse is the principal investigator for the study. So, which is an amazing achievement to actually have our chief nurse to do GCP and really vouch for us and really embed research in our organisation. And we are twinned with an American hospital, so I'm really looking forward to hear about how they do things. A couple of the projects that I'm doing are we've developed 85 research champions across all of our clinical areas, and there's a community of shared best practice which is growing at the moment with a closed Facebook group, with a Twitter account. We've added research into our quality audits, so we have inspections every month across the whole of our clinical divisions, and we've managed to get research on there. So it's people are actually starting to come to us was actually what are you doing in research? How can we get involved? And there's lots and lots of other things which I won't have time to go into today. But if you want to just move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and lots of lovely familiar faces in that photograph as well, Nicola.
Yeah. Yeah, these were just the words that I was thinking about, Gordon's, the metaphors that you use in research about what we do. And that's just some of the words that I was thinking about last night. But basically why I was thinking about that was because the videos that I'm going to show you, you'll see which ones perhaps that I've been involved with and ones that our comms team have been involved with. But communication is a massive part of my role, I'm sure of everybody's role. Education of other people of what research is about is a massive part of our role. And, you know, I'm trying to learn how to put films together and things like that. So we'll go forward now and show some of our films, if that's all right, Gordon. If you want to just get them set up. So we're going to show you a bit of a tour of our CRF. We're not speaking on the film, but you'll be able to see a bit of a feel of what our CRF looks like. We've got some nurses talking about what they've done in the pandemic, the core team of our CRF, seeing who they are, and we've done a little bit of an animation video trying to bust the myths, is that right, of clinical research, and we're going to be putting all of these out obviously tomorrow on International Clinical Trials Day, amongst lots of others as well. So I'll give you our Twitter handle as well if anybody wants to follow what we're doing tomorrow, but we've got loads and loads of videos because obviously we can't be walking around the hospital at the moment. So enjoy our videos. So obviously you can see it's quite a small CRF, but any clinical staff that come down to our CRF for any of the research studies or anything, well, it's so much better than the actual hospital itself.
It looks like great facilities.
Yeah, our little garden area is really nice. So we sit out there for our meetings. Obviously patients can sit out there when they have long visits.
Okay, here's the next one.
We are the Lancashire Clinical Research Facility team. Our aim is to make your visit to our facility a pleasant and welcome one as possible. Our team are Helena, Karen, Helen, Sam and myself, Lindsay.
In the research facility.
Right, well, as part of our day-to-day running here at the facility, we're really focused on patient safety. So we do a safety huddle every morning, routinely to discuss the trials that we're working on and any patient safety that needs to be highlighted.
So what different specialities do you work with at the research facility?
So we work across quite different specialties, including oncology, COVID, women's health, pain and other specialties as they come along really.
That's brilliant. And who do you collaborate with here at Lancashire Teaching Hospitals?
So we collaborate with other research teams within Lancashire Teaching Hospital and Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust to make sure that we provide a good streamlined and patient-focused care for our research patients and assistants.
And tell me a bit about what types of studies do you do?
We do early phases and experimental medicines in the clinical research facility.
Hi, Helena.
If you think you might be interested in a part-time Band 6 research nurse job in the research facility, why don't you pop over and come and have a chat to us? Thanks for listening.
Oh, that's a good opportunity, Nicola, there to be taken to try some recruitment. That's sneaky. Well done for that.
Yeah,
absolutely shameless. None of my team, if you're on this call, are allowed to contact.
It might be a bit far.
Mm.
During COVID, we've been redeployed onto all COVID trials. It's been a really testing time, but we've learnt lots and grown as a team.
During the COVID pandemic, I have been working on urgent public health research studies, mainly pan-COVID, which is a maternity-related research study which has helped us collect lots and lots of data so that we can understand how best to look after women and newborn babies that have been affected by COVID.
I'm quite new to the team, so it's great to hear about all the fantastic work that's been going on over the last year, and I really look forward to seeing what the future holds.
I'm working on a trial called TACKLE, which is using monoclonal antibodies to see if we can help to treat COVID.
I believe that we shouldn't protect children from research, we should use research to protect children.
I work on a neonatal unit where I run trials that help with the future quality of life for preterm infants.
During the pandemic, I have been shipping siren samples, which is a COVID trial, which helps researchers figure out how long antibodies stay in siren participants.
But recently I've been helping out with COVID-related trials, Excavia and Siren, helping with blood sampling and assisting with patients.
We've been doing loads of COVID research over the last year. We've been looking at saving lives, giving treatments, finding out what people's different symptoms are with COVID, and just help with the cause of finding the cure for COVID.
We mainly look at recruiting or inviting patients to different types of studies. We also deal with consenting patients, making sure they know all the pros and cons of taking part in a study, and we then arrange for the medication to be administered.
I'm doing siren study,
and the excovia is related to find their immune system, how it works when they get COVID. And we take bloods, take salivas, and we test that in the lab. So, and after that they get the result, so we'll find out how his immune system is good.
Marvellous. And,
Thank you. I like one of the quotes from one of the nurses. I don't know if you heard it. We shouldn't protect children from research. We should use research to protect children.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna use that hashtag.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a children's nurse, and I completely agree. And
yeah, I love it.
They are more capable than we often allow them to be.
Yeah.
I'm a research nurse. I've been a research nurse since 2006. Absolutely love research. I advise anybody coming into a clinical career to seek out what your research nurses are doing, because it is such a rewarding job to do in research. We get so much time with our patients, we can give that extra level of care. I want to highlight how research nurses have made an impact in the world of COVID. We've helped to save lives, we've helped to find the cure for COVID. Please seek out research nursing as a career.
Absolutely. I would add to that, you know, I mean, it's been a fantastic career for me, and I think it's something we really do need to plant the seed with for students in the future.
Yeah.
And staff.
Yeah, we're just starting our first student placements for nurses and midwives at the end of June, so looking forward to that.
How long are they with you for, Nicola?
They're with us only for a couple of weeks. We're starting off slow, and then working out how we can facilitate it. But we're looking at both sides of research. So from the delivery, so obviously shadowing that side, but also working with the academic faculty so that they can understand what the difference is. It's obviously all the same thing, but you hear quite often, don't you, that when nurses come out of qualification, oh gosh, I hated research as a student, it's just so boring. And but as we're all here because we absolutely love the job, don't we? And it's just about educating people what real world research is actually like, and actually everybody's got an idea on something that happens in a clinical world, a bugbear or whatever it is, and actually you can do something about that using research, whether it's audit or getting literature reviews or coming up with your own study. So it's just trying to educate them through comms, and we're developing an education package for clinical staff, literally going back to the basics of things, because the word research just is scary to people, puts people off, and we're trying to look at using sharing best practice, evidence-based practice, because that rolls off the tongue of nurses and midwives when they come out of university. So we're just taking it back to that, because that's all it is, trying to do that. So trying to really strip back things and get it back to basics. And this is just a very short film on busting the myths of what a lot of people think clinical research nurses do.
Great. And you're seeing that okay in the screen, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Marvellous, yeah. And there's a lot of myths about there about clinical research nurses and midwives, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's all really. Just showcase a little bit about where we are, and you know, if anybody wants to share any ideas on what they've done in other organisations to embed research within the clinical systems, then you know, feel free to contact me. On the last slide of my presentation, all the contact Twitter details and things are there, but I can pop it in the chat if anybody wants to contact us.
Yeah, that'd be great, Nicola. Thank you very much, and Fiona saying brilliant videos, and thank you very much for the presentation as well. And it's lovely facilities you've got there as well.
I'm very lucky.
Marvellous. Jen, do you just want to come back in again while I get the next presentation up? Thanks so much, Nicola. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Hello, Nicola. That was great.
Hi.
So the team are just, you know, you can tell that they love what they're doing, and it's been such a tricky year, hasn't it? So have you been involved in now in sort of turning your attention back to your previous portfolio and doing that big piece of work? I mean, turning it all off was so much easier than turning it back on again, is what we're finding. Is that how you feel too?
Yeah, it's like starting feasibility again, isn't it? And we've got, you know, a small project management team that do that, and they're getting it from everybody, because all of the teams, everybody's their priority to get things started again. So yeah, they're feeling it, and yeah, we're trying to do our own prioritization, and we're slowly getting there. But yeah, you're getting pulled from every pillar and post. The studies that were in set up even before, you know, actually they might be a bit more priority in than some of the studies that you had ongoing, and we've used it as an opportunity to perhaps close down some of the studies that it was just not really working. So yeah. So
I mean, that's a good exercise to sort of a bit of housekeeping, isn't it? And
yeah,
tidying up the portfolio. We're finding
Yeah.
it hard now because, of course, you know, it's marvelous that across the UK we've recruited over 1 million participants to urgent public health and vaccine studies last year. I mean, that's amazing. From March to March, it was over 1 million. That's more than we ever recruited before in any other year. But quite a few of those now need follow-up, as well as needing to look at the portfolio and get things going again. So the pressures are immense. And I just worry about the well-being. I know Stephen mentioned that, the well-being of the teams. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, it's been really hard. You see, you know, people are scared, you know, throughout the pandemic, of going to see the patients on the wards, and it has affected quite a few people. And so it's going to take a while to get back to normal, as well as the pressures of constant changes. Like you say, that's a normal human issue, trying to keep up. But you know, I think as research nurses, we are quite used to that. But obviously, it's more and more and more. And actually, now this is your priority. This is your priority. So yeah, we've had a mental bashing for sure, but we're slowly getting there. And you know, our organisation are looking at civility saves lives. I don't know whether you've seen that on Twitter and nationally, which is, you know, about looking after each other, and you know, being kind, and you know, that is helping us really. You know, we've got our own little civility tree of, you know, saying positive things to each other, lifting each other up, to just help with getting back to normality and what is our new normal.
I'm going to hand back over to Gordon. Looks like he's ready, but I just wanted to say I did a course this past week. It was very interesting. It was late in the day. It was called Love Leadership, and it was really interesting. And the word love, quite specifically about love. Anyway, over to the lovely Gordon Hill.
Oh, you're too nice.
Thank you.
You're too nice. Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you. So the next item is an interview that Claire did with Emil Cano, and Emil, I think, still on the call, and he's actually getting married tomorrow. So congratulations in advance for that, and thank you so much for doing this video for us. And it's about Emil's experience of becoming a clinical research nurse. So I'll play that now.
Not telling me it's recorded. Here we go.
All right, okay.
Hi everybody, I'm Claire Whitehouse. I'm the Senior Nurse for Nursing Midwifery and AHP Research at the James Paget University Hospitals, and I'm co-chair of the UK and Ireland branch of the IACRN, and I am here today with Emil. Emil, would you like to intro?
Yes, hi everyone. I am Emil Cano. I am a new clinical research nurse, mainly in oncology at the Bristol Hematology and Oncology Center. That's part of the University Hospitals Bristol and Western NHS Foundation Trust in Bristol, obviously. I'm new into the role, but my main background was in ITU. I moved to oncology recently, and then within a couple of years, I have moved into research, having worked from the day unit, and I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you in your smiley face.
Thank you.
So we thought we would speak to you all today about Emil's experience of how he first became interested in research and when did he hear about research nurses. So I think that's probably the best place to start, Emil. So
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
did you hear about the role?
I remember the first time that I got to be in contact with research nurses was when I was in ITU. You know, they come in their uniform and they introduce themselves as research nurses. All the while, you know, I was just helping them with collecting data, but didn't really think much about. I didn't really think much about what they did or the sort of stuff that they do.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I didn't realize just by helping them collect data, I was being part of research.
Yeah.
And then when I moved into oncology, the main reason why I moved into oncology was I thought, well, I'm in my late 40s. I've done my share of nights and weekends. I just wanted to move into an area of nursing that doesn't involve that. So I went into nursing in the chemo day unit, did that for a couple of years. And from there, I was in a lot closer contact to the research nurses because I was treating their patients. So getting a bit more of the nitty gritty because they have to go through the source data sheets, they have to go through the protocol itself before you get to treat a patient. So you know exactly what to do when you're treating the patient, not just giving their chemo, but actually following the protocol. And having done that for 2 years, I thought this is really interesting because even though I had the skills of an ITU nurse and a chemo giving nurse, I thought I can do this as well because not I was happy being a chemo trained nurse, but I thought this could be a further step for me in my career. I could still be giving chemo at the same time, being part of the development of new standards of treatment in oncology. So I thought, do you have a post? And when I said that, they said, yeah, actually, we have a post. And then they told me to do my GCP training. So I did that well before the interview. And when I got interviewed, I was quite surprised they gave me the job, and here I am.
So how long have you been in post now?
I've been in post now for 9 months, and
Amazing.
It's been really, really good because it was such a massive, what's the term? It's such a massive learning curve for being a newbie in the whole clinical nursing research world. It's exciting because I get to learn a lot. I love the fact that the balance between admin and clinical work, I'm still in touch with patients, but at the same time, I get to be behind the computer organizing everything for my patients. I just
Yeah,
love the balance between the two.
it's lovely. It's exciting, isn't it?
It
So
is.
when you first moved into your new post, um, how, I mean, it sounds to me like you're pretty excited. Um,
Very.
how did it feel? That what support were you given, and how did it? What was it like? How did it feel?
Um, it felt like a completely new world to me, obviously. Uh, the first few weeks, I think for the first 4 and 5 weeks, I was shadowing my team leader, who is a band 7 or band 8 research nurse. I was just following her. I was there not to do things for the first 2 weeks. I was just observing everything. And just by observing, I was able to put together the skills that I already have. And I thought, well, actually, I can do this just observing what they do. Because a lot of the basic skills I already have. It's just,
Brilliant.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
ensuring how to learn that alongside being a nurse with basic clinical skills, that I also get to learn and involve myself into learning how research is being done
Yeah.
by a clinical research nurse. So after 4 5 weeks, I was let out on my own, which I thought was quite scary. But obviously, my team leader observed me do a few patients with her. You know, she let me get on with it. She didn't do anything. She was there observing, and I think from those 3 episodes, she was happy with what I was doing. That's why she let me go on my own. And then I was given a promise that if you're unsure about anything, just come to me, just ask. And there are no
Yeah.
stupid questions. And I think um, that's really helpful for somebody who's new in research. You know that you don't have to know it all to start with.
Yeah.
As long as you know that you have a supportive manager who's there willing to coach you whenever you need it, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. So and think so. Just thinking about what does your support network look like? Have you found, because there's quite a big, as you know, from IACRN now,
Yes.
there's quite a big network of research nurses internationally. And I just wondered how you felt about that, or whether you've been able to explore any of that yet.
Yes. Um, Initially, obviously, before I got into research, I know you personally already. And from that point of view, my interest in research, well, you've sparked my interest in research, as well as by a couple of friends who moved into research before me. On top of the fact that uh, obviously I get to meet different research nurses within my hospital trust or organization. Um, Clinical research nurses around the UK and around the world who I've met on Twitter have been quite supportive, you know. Uh, Whenever I'm unsure about anything, when it comes to learning my competencies as a clinical research nurse, the Twitter world is there, teeming with experienced and knowledgeable and very supportive, enthusiastic, experienced clinical research nurses. People like, say, Emma Huron. When I pinged her a private message saying, there's something I don't understand about informed consent. And with just a few messages, she was able
Oh.
to clarify things for me. And this is all for free, you know. this is this is the positive things about social media when it's handled very well. If you use it for the right things and stuff, it works.
It
It
does.
becomes a
Yeah.
really very it becomes a really good platform for nurses supporting nurses, especially
Yeah.
in clinical research.
Definitely, definitely. I think we've
And you know that yourself, don't you?
exactly what I was just thinking as well, and for lots of patients as well, because we're all patients sometimes too. Not
Yeah.
to forget that. But you know, there's so many patient groups as well that you can learn from. I don't know whether you've met any of those yet, but there's sort of through all the hashtags and things. It's just great, isn't it?
It is great. It is great.
So what was I going to ask you? What would you say is your biggest challenge moving from a previous role into a research role? Is there anything that particularly stands out, or actually have you found it because of your background experiences?
I think the biggest challenge really was learning the language.
Yeah.
Coming from a completely clinical nurse and then going into research, I realized that, you know, after you have done the basics of your GCP training, in a research environment, the language is completely new to me. So I made sure that if there was something that was mentioned in a meeting or in a safety brief, if a new word came up or a new acronym came up and I didn't know what it was, I wasn't afraid to ask questions because um, I'm glad that I've been in a position where I have enough clinical experience to understand the job. But the whole research environment was a complete, like I said, it was a completely different language to me. And I've learned, I've learned the basics. I'm not saying I know it all yet, but yeah, it was the language really that they use.
Yeah, you're
It's
not alone.
amazing.
You're not alone.
The first few meetings, I was like, what are they on about? And then a few weeks down the line, everything, you know, things made more sense as as I was doing the clinics at the same time learning the job.
Amazing. So I was just wondering with the patients, so it sounds like you're probably seeing some of the same group of patients now that you were seeing in your previous.
Yes. Yeah.
And what does the dynamic feel like with your patients now? Do they, I mean, I know you, so I can imagine it's not really anything, but I wondered what it feels like for you, or, you know, and have your conversations with them changed at all because of your role or your knowledge or
Massively,
really?
massively. Because when I was nursing in the chemo day unit, I was just giving their chemo. Whereas now, where I have my own cohort of patients in glioblastoma trials as well as in prostate cancer trials, I I don't just give their chemo. I'm also able to be given that opportunity to have a professional relationship with them. I also being their research nurse, I'm also their sort of social worker or clinical nurse specialist. Me being given that privilege, I think it's such a privilege to be um, a fixed furniture. Whether that's good for them or not, I don't know.
I've no
But
doubt it is.
it's a privilege to be a permanent face to them during their treatment journey.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's amazing. I just love it. I just love it.
And have you had it's interesting. I keep thinking I'm asking you about how you feel about them. I wonder if have any of them said to you how they feel about you having this different relationship, you know, from their
They do.
perspective.
They do.
Are you
They
able to
do.
share?
Yeah.
Or
um for the first time in years, I don't normally get Christmas cards for patients, but last Christmas I had about 10
really?
from patients. Well, obviously not just Christmas cards, but uh, you know, tiny gifts of appreciation, all from patients that I'm treating in clinical trials.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to your previous question, um, when you're a clinical research nurse, you have that ongoing relationship with them, and when they feel that they are safe because you're looking after them for their safety, being in a clinical trial, you also have that human aspect of a relationship because they know that you mean well, and you're able to make them feel safe in their treatment journey. I think that's one of the joys of clinical research.
Oh, that's amazing. That what you've just said there, I can imagine it pinging up on the screen. It's the most amazing quote. It's lovely. What else can we talk about being a new research nurse? You look like you were about to say something. Did I interrupt you?
No, no, no. I can add something to what I just said. Obviously, working in cancer research, especially the ones in the brain trials, almost a lot of the time, the prognosis is not very good. Um, like I said, adding to my previous little story about the patients, one of my patients recently, his cancer has progressed. And because of that, he had to move into palliative care. Um, Having worked with him and his wife for the past few months, and when they realized that I was no longer in a frequent contact with them because they have moved into palliative care, they contacted me and said, "We miss your voice. Can you give us a call?" You know, it's things like that you
Oh,
never get. It's things like that you never get. But obviously, I still do their follow-ups. But when you get messages like that, it makes you
yeah.
feel, yeah, we probably, we think what we do in our roles as clinical research nurses is not a lot, but actually, it's the value that we add to the patient's lives and experience.
It's lovely. Just giving me goosebumps. And I was going to ask you why research is important to you, but I think you've probably just summed that up in the most beautiful nutshell. Is there anything else that you would add to that? You know?
I think the fact that I'm now in this world of clinical research nursing, I feel it's such a privilege to be part of the department, that arm of healthcare, especially our healthcare system here in the UK, the NHS, to be part of an organization or a movement that creates and keeps looking for questions to improve what is now standard of care. I think it's such a privilege, and to be a part of that, it is such a privilege and joy to add to my nursing career. And if I retire in this job, hopefully in the next 10 or so years, I'll be very happy.
Oh, that's lovely. So finally, because I think this is coming to a nice rounded interview now. What would you say to somebody who said they were thinking about going into clinical research nursing?
I will say go for it. Go for it because it's a very good branch of nursing. Because in clinical research, when you nurse in clinical research, you're not just a nurse, you are also part of the future of whatever nursing you are doing. You are part of the development of care, and I think that's very important. We should not rest on our laurels. Yeah, what we do now in practice is safe, but we should always look for ways to keep improving and keep asking questions. Research is great because it keeps us um, it helps us to ensure that we are providing care that is just not safe, but it's always evidence-based.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank
Emil,
you.
thank you so much for all that you're doing. Thank you to your patients as well for
Thank you
joining
too.
on with
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And thank you for speaking with me today. and we'll see you
It's my
soon.
pleasure.
And I might just throw in here to anybody that's watching this that Emil will be getting married when this is playing next week. So it's a lovely wedding.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Enjoy, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
What a lovely interview. And it's really great because I think, gosh, if I think about how long ago it was, 1995, I think, when I first moved into clinical research, and the transition then pre-internet was quite stark. So it's really interesting to hear Emil's perspective about that transition that he's had now and how he's got in. But I think everyone has their own pathway into clinical research, nursing or midwifery. But it's great to hear from Emil, and so enthusiastic as well. So I think there's Colette said she hasn't got a question, but as a brand new research nurse, she found it really inspiring. I'm not surprised. Elise can become a standalone. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's be really good to use that as to help to recruit people into becoming a clinical research nurse.
I like what he said about learning the language of research, because that's something I always point out to the new starters that come into our team, that's probably one of the hardest things, is learning the new vocabulary. And we did some work nationally when we were really trying to increase the staffing for the vaccine studies across the country. And some of the induction frameworks that we created had a glossary of terms, and just that on its own was just so helpful as a ready reference to have all these crazy words in one place for you to decode and decipher. Is Emil on the call still?
He was. I tried to unmute him.
He's unmuted. Is there anything you'd like to say before your wedding?
No, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure, Emil, and I think it really helps to kind of convey the kind of lifetime of people's experience in terms of clinical research nursing. Steve was rather cruelly alluding to the years of experience that were on the screen in his interview, but I think for someone who's just starting the journey of clinical research nursing, it's fantastic to hear your experience and as I say, your overwhelming enthusiasm for the role as well, which is just fantastic. Marvelous. Now I think we're down to have a break until past. We're running a little bit over, which is fine. So, but I think what we'll do is we'll just have a short comfort break until past, and then we'll kick off again at 10:30. So, but what I'll do is I'll just keep the session running because we've only got 8 minutes till the next presentation starts. So I'll just pause the recording and then restart it again at past. So I'll see you all again at 10:30. Did you see my tweet? When I had
No, I haven't had time to tweet.
I put a photograph up of my setup here, and it's got a big post-it note with red lighting, recording in it in big bold letters.
Good man.
Okay, let me just. Okay, so the next presentations are recordings. It's a reminder that I'm doing this. Are recordings from the NIHR Great Ormond Street Clinical Research Facility. So I'll just get those going. So this is from Lorraine Hodgson and her team there. So I'll just get those up. presentation. Sound on. Oh, wrong PowerPoint presentation. Sorry, this is when I try to multitask. This is when things go wrong. There we are. You seen that?
Yep.
Marvelous.
I recognise that beautiful place.
Mm-hmm. I've never been. I'd love to go.
We were there when it first opened.
Hello, my name is Kim Gardner and I'm the operational assistant here in the NIHR Clinical Research Facility at Greater Ormond Street Hospital. Today I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of our department, talk about some of the staff roles, both clinical and non-clinical, and how the teams work in different ways to support research across the hospital, share some thoughts about what research means for staff, parents and children, and then lastly, we'll take a look at playing the CRF. As you enter the CRF, you walk through the open play area, which is based on the woodland theme. Walking beyond the play area is the main reception, which is usually the hub of activity for both staff and families. Beyond the reception area is where the main clinical activity happens. Each of our individual clinical rooms continue the woodland theme and are named after trees, namely being maple, ash, willow, chestnut, pine, elm, holly and oak. Each room is flexible for either a bed or a treatment chair, depending on the study needs and also patient needs and preferences. Two of our rooms, Maple and Ash, have an interconnecting door, which is invaluable for siblings on the same trial or when we just need that extra bit of space for study-related equipment. Although most of our work is during core hours between Monday to Friday, where there's a study requirement, say for example, specific post-dose observation or for PKs that we are able to support overnight stays within the department. And when there is a need for short-term weekend study cover, we also factor this into our rotas. Taking a look at our clinical delivery team, you'll see the team is led by our head of nursing and two matrons supporting the research nursing teams within the wider trust. The NIHR CRF team comprises of an advanced nurse practitioner who, if you haven't heard about her role already as an AMP within the research at GOSH, you'll certainly hear about it later. We have 7 senior research nurses, one of whom is also a trainee neuromuscular AMP. We have 20 research nurses, 3 assistant research practitioners, 3 healthcare assistants, 2 apprentice nurse associates who will soon be qualifying and coming back to work as nurse associates with us, and a practice educator who has an overarching role across the whole of the R&I Directorate for Education. So how do we work as a team in the CRF? The CRF clinical team is split into smaller teams, each led by 2 to 3 senior research nurses who have oversight of all the studies within the team. Each of our research nurses leads on up to 8 studies currently and in various stages from setup, recruiting, follow-up through to those waiting closure and archiving. Teams then work to cross-cover each other where necessary. Our non-registered nurse team members are able to support these studies or by running visits independently on the trial. There are many studies such as registries and BRC projects that they also lead on with the support and oversight of a research nurse. Those teams working across the wider trust are the bone marrow transplant research nurses, haematology oncology research nurses, also supported by an advanced nurse practitioner, the PICU research nurses, and if you haven't heard about those, you'll hear about their amazing work later too. We have gene therapy research nurses and also a team of nurses that look at cardiac and pulmonary hypertension. We are lucky enough to have a research transition senior nurse who works between our division and the team in the wider trust to ensure that later phase trials can move and run into the clinical service. The transition research nurse also ensures a seamless transition into the clinical service when trials are coming to an end and are licensed or authorised for compassionate use, such as Brineura used in the treatment of Batten's disease. Our non-clinical team, having spoken about the clinical roles within the Research and Innovation Division at Great Ormond Street, which make up a team of about 50, there are approximately 40 members of the non-clinical delivery team, some of whom are based at the Research and Development Department in UCL. The non-clinical part of the team has developed over recent years as our research activity has increased. Roles within this non-clinical team include senior research coordinators, data managers, operational manager, clinical research delivery managers, and portfolio managers. The list is endless and the roles are evolving regularly. As with the clinical team, the non-clinical team are also aligned with different speciality teams across the trust. They are an integral part of the team to ensure that collectively we provide a seamless service. Those others that are equally important within the R&D team are the head of governance, clinical trials and contracts, quality manager, governance, and there are also many more. So thinking about the types of research that we do, we support all types of research from novel therapy, first in humans, stem cell therapy, early phase trials, plus those later phase trials that due to the nature and intensity of the study complexities or the disease process cannot be run within the clinical services. We also take part in many natural history studies that lead on to new and innovative therapies from this stage. Some of our novel and first in human studies include enzyme replacement therapy for some neurometabolic disorders, where the ERT is infused directly into the cerebellum by an intracerebral device. Therapies that replace the exon skipping in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, gene and stem cell therapy for babies and children with spinal muscular atrophy. We also support numerous clinical trials within the clinical setting where a child is acutely unwell or a prolonged stay is required. So thinking about research and what research means to you was a question that we asked some of our families. The commitment from our families to all of the trials is phenomenal, and many are attending weekly or several times in a 2 to 3 month period. And although we ask feedback at each visit, both what went well today, what could we have done better to improve or maintain our service standards, we don't always capture their thoughts and feelings about taking part in research. So for this, we asked those who were willing to answer, what does being part of a clinical trial mean to you? So some of the answers are on the slide there, but some of the other parts were meeting others with the same condition, being part of something. I personally like the one that says hope. It helped him a lot. He has some movement in his fingers and reduced use of BiPAP, which he now only needs at night. Another parent has said it's an opportunity to address the long-term rare medical conditions that can benefit others in the future. And specifically from the young people, a young man has just told me this morning, my lifestyle has improved. He also added, I'm able to do so much more than I did, and I feel that I was lucky enough to be part of this trial. Another young person said, helping people making a difference in the world, but also being able to research life-saving medication thoroughly with the best care and attention. For me, it was very interesting that none of them put anything about the level of commitment needed from them or any of the extra stresses that it may cause their siblings or other family members. Each one was solely about gaining something from the individual trials. So I asked about the impact of having a child on a complex clinical trial and what it had on the families. And each family's response was similar to that. that they would do anything for their child. The smallest of hope was enough. To most of the siblings, the trial days were just another hospital appointment, and they were used to that anyway. Almost had really good supportive networks prior to coming onto the research trial, so they were able to use those. For one young person, he said the impact of being on the trial was positive for his family, as his long-term condition had improved so much, and attending the CRF was far less intrusive than being unwell and unable to attend school and see his friends. And when we were thinking about what does research mean for staff, there's a few of the words up on the screen there, but opening up potential opportunities for children with long-term conditions that aren't currently available within standard clinical care was one that came through strongly. A sense of hope that it offers patients and families living with rare conditions. It allows us to be more informed about various conditions and develop treatment that to support and prevent any disease progression. When a drug gets licensed, knowing that I've been involved in that trial since the setup, and I love getting to know the families. It's been a privilege to be involved in such groundbreaking innovation. It's exciting and rewarding, as it says there. Testing boundaries, discovering and thinking outside the box, and stepping into the unknown. I think they're all quite powerful experiences of what research means to both families and to the staff. But lastly, I just wanted to touch on play in the CRF and what it means for us here. As you may have seen on our virtual tour, as we entered the CRF, the play area was unfortunately devoid of any available toys. This is due to trust guidance in the current COVID-19 restrictions that we are all under. Our amazing play specialist Amanda has created individual play boxes for our regular attenders and offers activities at a reduced selection for others when they arrive. And I've just put out a selection of them there so we can show you. All of our toys used for distraction come individually wrapped, and the children are free to take them home afterwards. So at least we have something. We don't have the regular amount of toys that we would normally have that are free and easy to play with. Our hospital play specialist role is invaluable within research in helping children talk through and understand the clinical trials in terms of what's involved, commitment needed, procedures involved, and working with them to overcome their fears and anxieties they may have. I hope you've enjoyed our short tour of the CRF and a short review of our services. Thank you for listening.
Marvellous, thank you very much. And Helen Ashton from Gosh is here if anyone has any questions. So there's some other videos to play, so I'll just get those lined up. Here we go.
Hi, my name's Lauren and this is Holly. We are both the senior research nurses here on intensive care at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and thank you very much for having us to speak to you today. We're really grateful to have been invited, and we hope we're just going to spend a couple of minutes just showing, telling you a little bit about our day and how we operate, and a little bit about how we've changed our ways of working since the pandemic. So we are a relatively big ICU research team. We've got 5 nurses, a couple of doctors, quite a lot of consultants that have got different studies. We have 3 people in our non-clinical team, and we are very much based on the intensive care. So each day we need to make sure that we have a really good understanding of all of our open research trials. We try very much to do every research trial that we're approached for within reason. So we're very much a kind of can-do type team. So each day we need to make sure we've got a really good understanding of the open studies. We screen every patient across the 4 units, so that's normally around 40 to 50 patients crossed with around 10 open studies. We often screen multiple times a day, so if we have an admission in the afternoon, we'll look at them again for all of the open studies. We work really closely with the whole MDT, so ensuring that everyone is aware of the open studies, ensuring that everyone's happy for patients to be recruited to them, and making sure that people are educated enough about the studies to recruit out of hours if necessary. We work in a slightly different way to other research teams in that we operate a model called deferred consent in some of our studies. So that means that we need to be really, really clued up about GCP in emergency setting. So making sure that we're always the patient advocate, and while we do recruit to research, sometimes without consent, making sure that they are always informed wherever possible, and that they are an appropriate enrolment into the study. We manage the studies really closely, so from setup we'll make sure that we're confident that it can work in our environment. We'll try and make changes before we open the study if possible. When it's open and running, we will then check that it's working well. If not, we'll suggest some changes that we think might be able to be made. If that isn't possible, then we'll see how we can adjust the way that the ward works, always kind of trying to adhere to what the study requires. And after all of that, it's really important that the nurses are taught about the research that's going on in their unit so that they're empowered, they're able to randomise out of hours. So we really feel like research is important, that it's really visible in the clinical area, people are not scared of research, and so sorry about that. And yeah, that it's just a part of everyone's normal day, and that's what I think we feel really passionately about, means being part of kind of a research hospital is actually, it's not something weird and wonderful that happens in a different department. It actually happens on a daily basis on the ward. So, yeah.
So consent with families is very different to us as compared to an inpatient and outpatient study. We consent families at the bedside in ICU, which we realise is a different way of consent for research. So we know that it's a very high stressed environment for the families, and there's a lot of barriers to understanding with that. So our roles in particular is to support the families and make sure that they are informed about the research that we do in ICU, and that they have the time to consider the research trial, and that we support them whilst they're stressed at the bedside. Also, it's really important that we support bedside clinical staff, because they have to undertake research tasks within that. So we not only do we support the families, we also support the bedside team. So our role is really varied from day to day. We work in the nature of a 24-hour critical care environment, and we can be called at any time of the day. And I think during the pandemic, our flexibility has really helped with that. So we've had patients admitted at all times of the day, and we've worked as an MDT, and that's really having a team approach, and opening to a 7-day service has really helped with that, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that we found there were different stresses. So when opening to 7-day service, it means that you're automatically thinner on the ground during the week. So instead of going from me working 4 shifts in every 5, I'm working 4 shifts in 7. So we had some different challenges with that as well.
Yeah.
So we also had, for example, staff sickness, redeployment, and we had nurses managing us as well, managing our own stress, us thinking about our own family that we hadn't seen for however long, and on top of that, our workload kind of tripling at times overnight. We definitely were keen to open every study that came through that was an urgent public health research study. So all of these things kind of came into play, but I think that our intensive care background really helped us with that in terms of having flexibility and being able to kind of chop and change at last minute.
And putting the patient first, knowing that families have multiple approaches for studies, and making sure that they have the time to think about the research and consent.
Yeah, and I think for the first time it was where we have recruited families to studies where we didn't actually know much about the illness. Before then, we would maybe study something in intensive care, but we would know a little bit more about the actual illness and the outcomes. And this was the first time where we were recruiting children into research studies, where we didn't actually know what this illness was going to evolve to become. On top of that, we had families that were isolating at home, so we had children in the ward that were alone and consenting their families at home via Zoom, sometimes at midnight. So I think all of these things meant that we've actually walked away from this and we work in a different way now, a little bit more flexibly. We have come away with a real kind of can-do attitude.
Yeah. And it's been really worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely.
That was lovely. You're on mute, Gordon.
Sorry, if I don't jump in quickly, then it starts playing some other videos. So, Grant, if you just want to have a wee
I
chat.
see Lorraine has arrived.
Yes.
Lorraine, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Jen. Hi, Gordon.
Hi.
Hi there.
Well, it's lovely to see you. Lovely to see the facility looks as it did the day I saw it when it was brand new. It's amazing.
Well, it's 11. I think it's 11 years old now, and they're going to be moving us because they're knocking that building down. So hopefully we'll get a nice new facility in the next couple of years. So we're just starting those preliminary discussions.
Oh, that's exciting. Well done.
So thank you everyone for joining in and watching the work that we wanted to share. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, everyone, I'm sure, was really taken by it and the great work they're doing. And in the facility, and as your pediatric intensive care team show it, outside as well, and the pressures that it all entails.
Yeah, I think it's been a real team effort. So like everyone across research and innovation have all kind of pulled, like every hospital, have all kind of pulled together to deliver our essential research, as well as try and support the rest of the pandemic and the wards as needed.
Yeah, and they said that there's overnights now within the CRF. Is that right?
Yeah, so we opened the CRF overnight about 5 or 6 years ago. Now, 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe slightly longer. Originally because we weren't able to facilitate beds on the wards at that stage just because of the hospital capacity. So although we weren't originally set up to be an overnight unit, we pre-pandemic would facilitate about 200 overnight stays per year.
Wow, that's a lot.
For certain studies. And I think one of the studies that's now got its license was for Batten's disease. And originally when that study opened, the patients had to stay overnight on pediatric intensive care. And then as they kind of went through dose escalation to dose stabilization and the extension phase, we were able to move that study down to the clinical research facility. And then the young people stayed overnight there. So actually over the pandemic, we haven't really had any overnight visits, but that's just because of a change in our studies. But we're beginning to kind of build those up again.
That's brilliant. No, that's a great addition to the use of the
it's
facility,
made things a lot easier for us, and also for like the PK, like the late PKs and things like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Marvelous. So the next presentation is from Helen, and I think Helen's on the call as well if anyone has any questions for her.
Hi, my name's Helen Ashton and I'm one of the research AMPs at Great Ormond Street Hospital. When I started this role, there was only one paediatric research AMP in the UK, Lucy Cooper at Birmingham and IACRN, so I quickly got in touch with her for some support. This was in 2017, and even now there are only 3 paediatric and 3 adult research AMPs plus 1 trainee working at GOSH. In 2018, we created a national forum for advanced practitioners in clinical research in the UK to provide peer support as well as to help develop the role on a national level. So I'm going to talk to you today about my role at GOSH, as well as the other AMP roles that we have. So to look at the different AMP roles in research at Great Ormond Street, how these came about and the differing ways these roles have been funded. Until recently, we had quite a flat structure. Opportunities were limited once you reached the Band 7 CRN role. In 2017, we found we had an increasingly complex early phase portfolio that needed a different skill set in order for us to deliver the portfolio safety. The opportunity for growth and innovation within the service was reflected upon, and Lorraine Hodgson, our head of nursing, had recently spent a fair amount of time over the previous few years with US colleagues and was impressed with how they had integrated the A&P role within clinical research. So my trainee A&P role was created. At GOSH, we now have 2 qualified A&Ps and 1 trainee A&P in research. These posts are band 7 whilst training and then band 8 on completion. My role is focused on early phase high intensity trials. Karen Howe works on the oncology portfolio, and Katie Groves is currently doing her A&P training and works on the neuromuscular portfolio. We've used a variety of funding models to secure the posts. For my role, utilising CPD Director allocation to top up an existing MSc award, and more recently, accessing the funding to undertake the training element of the position through Health Education England's apprenticeship pathway, a route which provides 40% ring-fenced time alongside funding for the training element of the role. In addition, we have utilised a number of different approaches to establish the posts and ensure sustainability. These include building the positions into the core Research and Innovation Directorate infrastructure, as well as utilising a mix of charity post funding and commercial research income to fund the positions. Sustainability of the posts has been an ongoing discussion, and aside from what I've already mentioned, we're exploring phased infrastructure funding models, as well as working with the PI and study sponsors to build the cost of the research A&P into the trial budget at the outset. A model that is a work in progress, but certainly received initial positive responses. So just to tell you a little bit about my background and training and my path into research. So I was an oncology staff nurse from newly qualified and worked up to CNS within this area and have around 14 years experience. And that's where my interest in research began. I moved to Great Ormond Street Hospital in 2015 as a research nurse and was recruited into the trainee post in 2017, just after completing my first master's. I then immediately began my A&P programme at LSBU. I completed this in May 2019, just in time to take a year's maternity leave. So I've been back in this post for 1 year. I feel like it's going really well and have achieved a reasonable amount so far, particularly when you consider the current situation. I'm on logs as a sub-investigator and have been since May 2020. I carry out physical exams as well as dosing, and I aim this year to extend the number of studies I work on, and also I'm hoping to open my first study as PI this year. So like all A&Ps, we job plan using the 4 pillars approach, but our levels of activity may be quite different. For example, our research activity will most likely be a lot higher than a general P's A&P. And we also find that it's variable day to day, week to week, and month to month, depending on what studies are open, what stage they are at, as well as other priorities and the general nature of our work. So thinking about our same way as the research fellows that I work with. This role is to support the principal investigators with the clinical delivery of the trials. We work as autonomous practitioners providing medical cover on the CRF for research participants. We can assess, diagnose, treat and refer patients, often taking complex of patients. We can assess eligibility of patients for trials and
I'm sorry, everyone. Gordon, are you there? You're muted.
What happened there?
I don't know. It looks like we lost your, it looks like you froze and we lost the signal to the video.
So will I just go back?
Yeah, just boot it up again.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's your dodgy Wi-Fi.
It is. I'm stealing from the neighbour.
Not very well.
Devices. I also carry out non-medical prescribing and radiological requesting. We also provide provision for continuity of care and help with the transition of new drugs into the clinical service. So in terms of our management and leadership pillars, we all have many differing examples. Day to day, we provide leadership to both the clinical and non-clinical teams in which we work, and this can help support professional development as well as provide peer support. We work on SOPs, guidelines, policy, working practice document development. As I mentioned previously, we formed a research AMP forum with the other research AMPs around the country. We assist with setting the direction and vision for the CRF in which we work. We try to lead the way for AMPs in research and provide education about our role, doing presentations such as this, as well as publications and other conferences. We're working towards trying to develop a new career pathway for paediatric research, and I really enjoy talking to new research nurses and seeing the enthusiasm when they learn about the possible career pathway that they could have. We're also members of other national forums and strategic groups. So a big thing is that we've all faced challenges in these research AMP roles, and these have been common across all research AMPs in the UK. We need people to understand and accept our role. And for this, as I previously mentioned, we're trying to educate people about our role. We need to show people that the role is beneficial for them. We show the PIs how it helps them carry out research, etc., with reducing the burden of research on them. We need to work within the confinements of regulatory bodies. As the quote there shows, the MHRA in GCP is quite subjective. It talks about a qualified physician. Does that include an AMP? And we've seen variation from sponsors as to what they are happy for AMPs to do. So maintaining our own professional development and skills. There is no specific training for research AMPs or competencies to achieve. We've just fitted around other people's and other roles. And there's a large variety of specialities included. So the high intensity trials that I work on could come from any speciality across the hospital. And finally, demonstrating our success and value for money. It's quite difficult to show how the role works. It's quite subjective, but we could look at patient experience, continuity of care, reduced waiting times, as well as support from junior members of the team. So future aspirations of our role. Personally, I want to develop my role and as many skills as I can to work at the highest level I can do. Potentially in the future being the PI for CTIMP studies. I hope we can see more research AMPs across the UK and that we can help develop a career structure for other research nurses. Alongside this, we're working for greater national recognition of the role, as well as greater acceptance. If you have any questions, I'll be happy for you to get in touch and we can talk to you about them. So I'd just like to acknowledge Lorraine Hodgson, the Head of Nursing at Research and Innovation, who's driven the development of these roles, as well as Lucy Cooper and the other members of the National Forum for Advanced Practitioners in Clinical Research. Thanks.
Marvellous. And you know what, I think it really helps to demonstrate the different career routes that you can have in clinical research now. I mean, my own background has led me into education. There's Helen into advanced practice, there's leadership, and I think it really helps to strengthen a career pathway and different career pathways in terms of what you would like to do within the role. And I think that only strengthens the profession and the specialty of clinical research nursing and midwifery.
Absolutely. Lorraine, do you know about the Associate PI scheme?
Yes, I do. And we've been looking at that in the middle of everything else. But yes, so I think some of the guidelines we were thinking about potentially is something that our AMPs can explore, but we haven't kind of got to the bottom of it yet because it's only specific studies. And when we kind of looked at our portfolio across the organisation with our deputy director, we didn't feel we had any suitable at the moment, but it's definitely something that we're going to explore further. I mean, Helen's actually on the call as well, as
Which
is
Helen is she?
so Helen Ashton, and
Okay.
Lucy Cooper is also on the call as well. So Lucy was the first paediatric AMP in Birmingham, so we've got a really
Yes.
close working relationship with her.
I'm just
Sorry,
trying
Lucy,
to find them. I'm trying to find them to ask them to unmute. And I'll do that while you keep talking. So the thing about the associate PI scheme is that it's open to non-research staff. Helen, I've
Absolutely.
just asked you to unmute. So I'm doing some work nationally.
The one
with
that's there, and as a new action that end of June to get feedback from Lucinda and Christy. Is that okay?
Helen, is that you unmuted?
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Okay, hi. And I'm going to find Lucy. I see Lucy.
Okay.
And you're unmuted in a minute if you unmute yourself.
So please notify all of our class patient as business.
Helen, while Jen's doing that, there's a question from Chifundo asking, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in becoming an ANP?
I mean, I think go for it. You just need to maybe shadow someone, see what their role is. I'd done a lot of my master's modules when I worked as a CNS, but then when this opportunity came up, it was great because I could use my experience of that to move into this role. But it's perfectly possible to be in research and start your AMP training from a research nurse, which is what our trainee at the moment is doing.
And you kind of touched on this in your presentation, but in terms of sponsors' willingness to kind of expand the delegation to yourselves, is that something that's becoming easier, or is it something the discussions are ongoing about?
I think it's quite variable. I think some studies I'd worked on prior to doing my AMP training, so the team knew me, and I think it was a lot easier then to move into the extended role. Whereas I've got new studies coming up now where maybe the sponsors are not quite as keen. But I think that's just because they don't quite understand it. So I think Lucy's been doing it a lot longer than me. She's probably got a better answer on that, but I think it is just quite variable depending on the sponsor.
Okay, I'm just bringing in Lucy there. Lucy, do you have some thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, so it is quite variable, the experiences that we've all had throughout the UK. I think it's just perseverance. It's about educating sponsors and key stakeholders really in what our role is, making sure that it's very clear what education and experience we have, and the level and training and the level we work at. You know, we're working at the same levels as registrars. You know, we're undertaking a lot of the roles that the PIs and other medical suppliers are doing. And it's just recognition that they see past that nurse in the title or, you know, advanced clinical practitioners, and that they really understand that. And, you know, we're working with sponsors from UK and beyond, America and everywhere. So it's making sure that they just really understand, and it's perseverance, getting in early with the sponsors, building up the portfolio, making sure that, you know, you can lead by example. So, you know, I keep working with the same couple of sponsors. And once they get familiar, then you can go to your next sponsor, and they, you know, you've got your credibility to be able to demonstrate what you've achieved previously.
If we say end of June.
Yeah, and it just takes time.
I also think that this past year has shown that we need to have a bit of flexibility in how we use people's expertise.
Definitely.
And certainly even our senior nurses, our senior sisters in Southampton and across Wessex were consenting to the phase 1 studies because we just had to. And the protocol was actually written to allow that, which was very interesting. And we hadn't really seen that before. So we had the physicians there, the medics there for backup, but very rarely were they needed to do anything more than the nurses were doing in terms of explaining and obtaining consent in a really, you know, it took about 40 minutes per person. It was quite a lengthy process to go through all of it, but it's interesting. And I know there's some discussions we're going to have nationally with the CRF network. I've just had some emails about that. We're setting up a meeting, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I just wonder in terms of of making some headway with the associate practitioners around, associate PIs rather, around opening that up to research staff as well as your clinical colleagues. Because to me, it's ironic that a clinical nurse practitioner working at GOSH could become an associate PI on this scheme, but you wouldn't perhaps be allowed to because you have research in your title, Helen. So it's that sort of thing that I think we need to get some better enlightened thinking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Just make as more changes as I can right now.
Marvelous. Okay, so we'll move on to the final presentation, and hopefully my internet will hold up this time.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this work with you today. My name is Lorraine, and I'm the Head of Nursing for Research and Innovation at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me to give some background and context to the project. So I'm a paediatric trained nurse with a variety of general peds and specialty peds experience. I became interested in research whilst working in paediatric intensive care, and in 2007 I moved to work in a research nurse role. In 2012, I was appointed as the Head of Nursing for Research and Innovation. And over the last 9 years, I've held a number of different national and international business and its importance in practice. In 2015, I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in an International Nursing Science Fellowship Programme at Boston Children's Hospital with Dr. Meg McCabe. I'm currently a Florence Nightingale Leadership Scholar. As I mentioned, I've been a head of nursing for a number of years, and I'm passionate about promoting the role of the clinical research nurse and improving the research participant experience.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said something there, Jen.
At GOSH, we employ approximately 50 clinical research nurses who work across the organisation. We also have a dedicated 8-cubicle research space, the NHR Clinical Research Facility, where the key focus is on the delivery of early phase clinical trials, although the team work on most phases across the hospital. In 2012, I met Shauna Browning, one of IACRN's past presidents at a conference in the UK. It was here I was invited to speak at the IACRN conference in San Diego some years back in 2013. This is where my life as a research nurse changed and a number of different opportunities opened up. I met Tara, Becca, and Michelle, who were from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, who subsequently invited me to speak at their hospital in 2014. I also met Dr. Meg McCabe, who invited me to join a 2-year nursing science fellowship program at Boston Children's Hospital, to work with her as my mentor on a project of my choosing. This was such an amazing opportunity. For the next 2 years, I flew to Boston every 3 months for a week to attend the program lectures and work with Meg on my project idea. I wanted to undertake a project that I was passionate about and that was going to be beneficial to clinical research nursing. So Meg and I agreed I would focus on something around clinical research and the participant experience. I really wanted to be able to understand the impact of the clinical research nurse and articulate what it was they do, as there are so many varied descriptions and misconceptions out there. The definition of impact can be the influence or difference brought about by providing a service or by having a specific healthcare professional in post. So in 2015, we conducted a literature review, which highlighted several common themes for clinical research nurses working across the globe. The themes were about how they felt about their role and the ambiguity surrounding this and the role expectations. It highlighted the experience they had and the role they played in education, as well as the education required to undertake the clinical research nurse role. It also highlighted the importance of communication and collaboration, as well as setting out some key aspects of what they bring to the role. It's evident from the literature that understanding and defining the role of the clinical research nurse is an important subject. However, there is limited evidence in addressing the impact of the clinical research nurse role and the impact it brings to the participant experience. Following the literature review, a research focus group study protocol was developed. The protocol aim was to explore the clinical research nurse's perceptions of the impact of the role of the clinical research nurse on the young people's experience of participating on a research trial. We identified 3 sites: Boston Children's Hospital, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, both in the US, and then Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in London. So we worked, as I said, we worked across 3 sites, so the 2 in the US and 1 in the UK. There were a number of challenges with this in the sense of the fact that you had one core protocol, but then actually you needed to have 2 different protocols because there were subtle differences between US and UK language and interpretations. And as well as that, I had to submit 3 separate ethics applications, as well as attend 2 hospital boards to get approval to conduct the study. We picked focus groups because we felt it was the best methodology, so a chance to talk and capture more feedback. The literature review demonstrated that there was little out there on this subject, so it deemed to be the best fit. So we conducted 7 focus groups across 3 sites. The total number of participants were 33. The data was collected between 2016 and 2019. So the US data was collected in the summer of 2016, and I was really fortunate enough to be able to go over and participate in collecting all of that data. And then there was a gap for the UK data that was collected in the summer of 2019. The delays were mainly due to a few logistical challenges. So in the middle of all of this, I took time off to have a baby and I had a year's maternity leave. I had to reapply for my UK ethics because it had expired by the time I came back from my leave. I needed to identify someone in the UK to complete the focus groups on my behalf, as it wouldn't have been appropriate because I was the overall manager for the team of nurses at Great Ormond Street. You can see a snapshot of the questions here that we used to form the focus group guide, and thematic analysis was used to derive the key themes, which I'll talk about later, utilising the framework set out by King and Horrocks. Okay, so descriptive observations and demographic data. The age was really varied. It was well spread across both US sites, and the UK nurses were in a slightly younger age group, which is typical of the Great Ormond Street staffing profile. Again, the years as a research nurse reflects the age of the respondents, and I think it's important to note that the London unit had only been established for 10 years, and that was why we were seeking our research nurses. So many of them couldn't have been in post longer than 10 years. And then the educational attainments were pretty standard across all of the sites, and the phases of studies that they all worked on was a mixed representation across all sites. So what did I discover about my clinical research nurse colleagues? Well, the majority of them fell into research nursing, citing hours, flexible shifts. Many of them had felt burnt out on the floor, on the wards, and some of them really felt they needed a change. And interestingly, for some of them, it was the first time they could see nursing as a long-term career. So the role and enjoyment. They talked a lot about how they described their roles. I think it's important, as if we can't describe and articulate what it is to be a research nurse, then how can we expect others, now senior nurse leaders, to understand what we do? And to go one step further, how can we ensure that we are recruiting the right people? The nurses talked a lot about what they enjoyed. So they really enjoy the autonomy and being in control of their workload and utilising their skills. They loved the relationships that they developed with the families, and this was a key highlight throughout all of the text, which leads us on to the next slide in areas where they felt they had the most impact. So they highlighted the nurses demonstrated really that there were 4 key areas of impact, and each area of impact had subsequent themes, some of which are cross-cutting. So these were around staff, organisation, external impact, and impact with the participants and the families. So the next few slides are going to be a snapshot of where the clinical research nurses feel they have the most impact. So if we talk about staff impact first, they talk about where they had impact with their colleagues both directly and indirectly. The research nurses saw themselves as pivotal to the delivery of the research protocol. They shared their views on the impact with their colleagues, how they were key to making things happen smoothly. They saw themselves as facilitators and communicators. They also highlight the importance of the relationships they build in order to achieve aspects of the research protocol. So like having to prove themselves. One nurse talks about how the nurses no longer eye roll when they walk onto the ward, and they are now willing to help each other out. They talk a lot about coordination and how it really is amazing teamwork. So for organisational impact, really they highlight the differences between the clinical research nurse and coordinators. It's an interesting point because across all three sites, they talk about the value of the nurse registration and what this means to the organisation. At the time, this was particularly relevant in the US due to a number of budget cuts, and also within the UK due to research nurse shortages and the national nursing shortage. They feel that they're key in improving the research organisational culture, and they talk about how the clinical research nurse brings together key nursing skills and transferable skills, and again, the importance of their professional registration. Externally, they felt they had the most impact when they focus on the importance of delivering the professional relationships with sponsors and CRAs. They talk about how they can input into the protocol research design and how they're also important in the study's success about maintaining and supporting recruitment, and how this, having the research nurse involved improves the uptake and retention in studies. Participants and families impact. I think for me, this is where the impact really shone out from all three transcripts from the focus groups. It was a real privilege to be part of and read the transcriptions of the focus groups. The sense of compassion and pride that the nurses had in their work, and the overwhelming sense of how they were working flat out to deliver the safe care to their participants, was really humbling. They clearly demonstrate the clinical research nurse value and the impact they have on the participant journey, from advocating for a young person to leave a trial as they can't emotionally cope with anymore, to being the family's key link for the duration of the care. They give really clear examples of how research enables you to provide personalised care that all nurses should be able to provide, but you can't always due to the constraints of the clinical wards. And they really highlight the role they play in participant safety and the responsibility this entails. Now, it's quite a long quote, but there is a quote, it's the second from the bottom, where they talk about how overwhelming they are with the safety aspects and patient safety, and that they feel like, that sometimes the research nurse is the first person or the key person to see that data first of all, and then they have to liaise with the PIs and the rest of the team to ensure their patients are safe, and the responsibility that entails. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. Okay, so in summary, this work provides a new insight and understanding of the impact of the clinical research nurse role. There was a huge amount of data, and I'm still undergoing further analysis of this. There are many similarities between the US and UK data, although there are some interesting differences which I will continue to explore. I think the findings can be used to inform and improve participant experience, as well as provide core knowledge for senior healthcare leaders when understanding the contribution of the clinical research nurse to the nursing profession. A few things I think are important to know regarding limitations. By chance, all were female. All participants in the focus group were female. Nursing is a largely female-dominated profession. However, different perspectives may have been held by a more mixed cohort. So I've already mentioned some of the site limitations. So around Great Ormond Street, we've only been established for just over 10 years now, and we're in a central London location. This means our workforce is typically younger, they can sometimes be more junior, and they're more mobile. And we have an increased staff turnover. So we have less years of experience as a research nurse and less organisational memory. If I was to do this again, it would be good to look across the UK at more established units to understand if the views are slightly different. And then I think I've already touched on this, but time in between data collection. It's important to note that this project, this study that I've done wasn't attached to an accredited pathway, so it was part of the Nursing Science Fellowship Programme, but it wasn't part of a PhD programme or anything else like that. So a lot of this work has been done in my own time, and as I said before, I took time off to start a family and things like that, and having to reapply for ethics. So there was a delay in the data, which obviously isn't ideal. And just to kind of add as well, so all data was collected in the presence of doctoral prepared nurses. So I collected the data for Cincinnati and observed the data collection in Boston. and for London, 2 colleagues in the Orchid Research Unit, Paul and Kate, collected the data, as it wouldn't have been appropriate for me as I manage the research nurses in London. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that's been involved in the project, and particularly to Meg, Tara, Becca and Michelle from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, IACRN, Kate and Paula from Great Ormond Street, Gosh Charity for funding my fellowship, and all the nurses who participated in the focus group. So thank you very much.
Marvellous.
Oh, what a lovely photo. The good old days when we could stand next to each other at conferences. Yay.
It's such an important thing, though, because I think we really do need to show the impact that clinical research nurses have in their role. There's lots of challenges in clinical research, not least in terms of funding. And I think if we can really demonstrate the benefit of having clinical research nurses involved in clinical research, then I think that's all to the good. So it's really well done in doing that. And I think the fact that you've really had a multi-centre approach with that's fantastic as well, and I completely agree. The guys in Cincinnati and Meg are just they're all amazing. So, and it really reinforces the international perspectives on clinical research nursing as well. Great. Does anyone have any questions for Lorraine? I think Lorraine's still on the call.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that this actually, when I wrote this protocol, it's actually in 3 parts. I made it much bigger, but then I'm quite ambitious and I realized I needed to kind of narrow it down. So there are 2 more parts of the protocol, which include having focus groups of patients and their family and their parents, as also as having focus groups of PIs. So I have now decided that before I carry on doing any more, as it is a huge amount of work, I need to get myself into an accredited program. So hopefully this will form part of my professional doctorate that I'll start in September. But yeah, it's quite exciting, and it all wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met Jen at a conference, at one of the UK SRF conferences, and then went to another conference. Anyway, so you never know who you're going to meet at a conference and how your life will change.
Exactly. And you changed my life too, Lorraine. So well, I'm so delighted for you. That's such a wonderful thing to hear today. That's a great way to celebrate. Thank you.
I think Steve's got a question.
More of a comment, really, a really important point that you brought up there, Lorraine, was really around the nurses being able to articulate what it is they do and the impact of what they're doing. And just to keep on, for us that manage staff, it's really important that we keep reinforcing that. Why are we required, really, and what is it we do? So never to lose sight of that. Really is just a plea to us all, I suppose.
I mean, this all came about a number of years ago because the chief nurse, three or four chief nurses ago, couldn't understand why I couldn't redeploy my nurses just to help generally on the wards, not in extreme circumstances, but just generally why they couldn't have them. So I was kind of like, I really need to think about how I can make senior leaders understand. But it was also on the flip side, when we were interviewing people that wanted to be research nurses, I used to ask them, what is it do you think you're going to be doing all day? And some of the answers were just hilarious because people didn't understand even what they were applying for. So it's taken me much longer to get to where I am, obviously, with this study, but I hope that we can use it to inform recruitment and job descriptions and kind of take it further.
Good for you. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to take an opportunity to make a plug for professional doctorates in clinical research nursing. It's a route that I did use myself, and I think sometimes when I moving into higher education, the expectation was that I would have a doctorate, and I think as everyone, you start looking at a PhD, and I think the issue that I had is that my specialty was clinical research. I didn't have didn't have an oncology background. I didn't have a cardiology background, so I actually found it really difficult to find a PhD to pin the topic to pin the PhD on. And it was actually by chance that the dean of the university I was at the time and said, had you thought about a professional doctorate? So these are generally part taught and part thesis based, but the big difference is it can be really related to the role that you have in your job. And I think, Lorraine's point about using the work that she's done as a kind of conduit to then going into the professional doctorate is a really important one, and I think it's one that's really, really quite important for this workforce.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there was no way. I mean, like a traditional PhD, I looked and looked, and there's just nothing. And people wouldn't fund me particularly because the stuff I'm interested in is really valuable, but it's not what the big funders are funding, and it wouldn't meet the criteria for NIHR PhDs and all that sort of thing. So I think you're right. The professional doctorate definitely works well. Well, I hope, she says. We'll see in 40. We'll see how long it takes.
No, absolutely.
Probably another 10 years.
Has anyone got any?
You're young.
Absolutely. Any questions for Lorraine?
Can I just say a massive well done to Lorraine, because I love hearing, we've kind of been hearing bits about this over the last few years, and it's so nice seeing it all as it is now kind of pulled together. I know you've still got lots to do, but thanks for sharing, because it's just been really good to see. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very inspirational.
I think this is its widest
definitely. It deserves it.
Marvellous. So unless anyone's got any final questions, then I think we'll probably draw the morning session to a close. Before I give you more details about when we're going to be restarting, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's contributed this morning. It's been really, really interesting, and I'm sure it's been informative for everyone who's been attending. So we're going to be stopping the session just now and then restarting in the afternoon, and Claire's going to be chairing the session in the afternoon, and so we'll be restarting at 12:15. So make sure you're here sharp, because we've got a rather special guest who's going to be doing a presentation. Do you want to say about that, Claire?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say, if people want to try and come just maybe a couple of minutes before, because I'm very conscious. So Ruth Endicott has just been appointed as the Director of Nursing for the NIHR, and it's literally her third day in post today. And but she's been absolutely amazing. She's been really, really keen and wanted to be here live with us all. So we're going to do a short interview for sort of 15 minutes or so. So it would be really great if we can start on time, because I've no doubt whatsoever that her diary is absolutely jam-packed. But I think it speaks volumes that she says that she said that she wants to be here, and not only that she wants to be here, but she wants to be here live. So I'm really, really appreciative to her. So we're very excited to see her in a bit. So yeah, maybe come just before, and we'll start letting people in, if that's okay.
Gordon, are you going to put a sign up or something so that if people did? Oh, I guess
we're going to close
a waiting room. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll open it up a bit earlier so that the people will know. So, yeah. Okay.
Fabulous.
Grand. So I'm just going to end the session just now. So anyone who's in, you will need to log back in for the next session. But again, thank you very much to everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gordon.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.